speaker, which will be Mr. Zul Elfian Umar, the leader of Solok City for 2 periods. And he aided Solok City in achieving numerous accolades, including the government accounting standards, recognition as a child-friendly city, and the Adipura Award for Sustainable Urban Cleanliness. Thank you. Please welcome him on stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say thank you for leader of Copstage, and I want to say thank you for the all speaker, amazing speaker, and all of you, I'm glad to meet you. Furthermore, I want to introduce myself and our city. My name is Elfian Umar. I am mayor of Solok City. Maybe, where is Solok City? Where is? Maybe you first time here, name of Solok. Solok City is located in province West Sumatra. West Sumatra. Now, we sing again, what is Sumatra? West Sumatra. Sumatra is island in parts of Indonesia. West part of Indonesia includes the big island, Sumatra. And Sumatra, West Sumatra is one of province in Sumatra Island. Solok City, one of 7 cities in West Sumatra. Small city, but we want be a clean, green, beautiful, and healthy city. Let's, we see I want to tell about Solok City before. Yeah. Solok City, yeah. Okay. This is Sumatra Island. Sumatra Island. And next. All audience, we realize we live in one earth, and we cannot live in another planet, so that we have saved our earth through keep our environment. This awareness, we always try to deliver to all of the people in our city. hope the all people in our city have awareness and keep environment always clean and green, so that our government have many policy and regulation, such as the prospective married couple are obligated to provide a couple of tree and plant the tree at certain place. Such as then our policy and regulation or the society have a responsibility to look after the trees and the environment around them. And we have innovation to keep our environment. We call Clean Friday and Green Saturday movement. This program both in school and residential area. String fruit trees program. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many program and regulation to keep our environment in Solok City, because we know we have to keep our environment if we want to live more better. If we success, if we will get better life, but if we fail, we're ready to face a disaster or destroy. Now, this awareness always we deliver it to our people in our city. And we want to elaborate the one policy, the prospective married couple are obligated to provide a couple of tree and plant the tree at the same place. The couple to provide have obligations to the couple who get married to provide the tree and plant in the certain place. Apa? Okay. Ya, bagus. Makasih. Biar nyambung
Yeah,
ya.
hello. Sorry, because I think, his charismatic is not being translated. If he's trying to speak in English, I'll let him speak in Indonesia and I'll translate.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Oh yeah.
Makasih loh Pak,
Yeah.
jauh-jauh ke sini.
Yeah.
It's our first mayor for that really commits. As you can see, where else is there a commitment where if you get married, you got to plant a tree?
Ya, ini adalah sebuah kebijakan dan aturan yang kita buat bahwa setiap pasangan ya yang ingin menikah ya berarti ada dua orang ya perempuan dan laki-laki harus menyediakan dua tanaman ditanam pada tempat yang ditentukan ya boleh saja dia menanam di hutan kota, kita punya hutan kota. Kemudian atau di tempat yang mereka inginkan. Mereka punya tanah, tapi mereka harus menyediakan dan menanam bibit itu.
So the regulation was designed, implemented the policy. So the couple have to provide 2 seedling of trees, and they can plant it in the forest of the city or in their designated location.
Ya. Terus, ya. Kemudian, ya, setiap orang harus bertanggung jawab untuk menjaga tanaman dan lingkungan yang ada di tempat tinggal mereka sendiri. Ya, bertanggung jawab. Ya, caranya dia menjaga, ada tanaman di depan rumahnya, harus dia menjaga, termasuk juga menjaga perhutanan sosial, hutan-hutan lindung. Ya.
Part of the policies including everybody to take care of their own plants and greenery in front of their house and surrounding community, and including the protected forest.
Nah, kalau ada yang mencoba untuk melanggar aturan, dia akan mendapatkan sanksi. Pertama, sanksi sosial daripada masyarakat dan sanksi dari pemerintah. Ya, kalau dia merusak tanaman, dia harus menanam pohon berikutnya.
So there has been a community effort. So anyone that was found to destroy a tree or plant, they have to replant, and that is the social penalty by the community. But also there's another penalty by the government.
Berikut kita punya ini, ada gerakan namanya setiap hari Jumat pagi dan Sabtu pagi, Jumat, setiap hari Jumat dan Sabtu. Kalau hari Jumat adanya gerakan kebersihan. Hari Sabtu gerakan menanam pohon. Ya.
Every Friday is the day to clean the city, and every Saturday is the day to plant.
Ya. Nah, kegiatan ini kita inginkan untuk menanamkan kesadaran bahwa masyarakat juga bertanggung jawab terhadap kebersihan, bertanggung jawab terhadap keteduhan kota itu sendiri.
This is all, to encourage awareness. So it's a community team building effort for the city.
Ya. Kemudian kegiatan ini tidak saja hanya di kelompok masyarakat, tapi juga di sekolah. Nah, di sekolah, setiap sekolah yang ada itu ada namanya kebun sekolah, ada hutan sekolah. Nah, dia harus dididik dulu semenjak daripada dari usia dini, ya usia dini TK sudah mereka ada gerakan kegiatan-kegiatan menanam baik bunga maupun tanaman.
He also included from very early early in kindergarten to have your own garden and to teach the kids to plant their own flowers or herbs or plants.
Kemudian ada kembali lagi slide before. Ada yang namanya program kita sedekah pohon. Ya, setiap orang diharapkan tidak hanya membantu orang lain dalam bentuk uang atau benda lain, tapi dalam bentuk pohon. Ya. Kemudian ini kita gerakan, termasuk nanti kita himbau ketika ada orang yang ketika memakan buah-buahan, bijinya tidak dibuang ke tempat sampah, tapi ditanam dalam polybag ya.
And there's also a movement on instead of donating money, you can donate a plant and a seed. And he actually implemented in part of the program, when you eat your fruits, do not throw it to the bin, but put it in the polybag to be replanted.
Nah, tanaman ini bisa saja nanti dia tanam di pekarangannya sendiri, atau di pekarangan tanahnya sendiri, atau dia sedekahkan kepada tetangganya atau kepada orang lain. Gerakan sedekah pohon.
a tree movement, and how is that moving forward? You can plant it in your own garden, or you can actually give it to your neighbor, or pass it down to your community to be planted.
Nah, di samping program-program ini, kita juga sudah melakukan program pengurangan sampah dengan metode reduce, reuse, recycle, sampah dari sumbernya, sehingga dan sampah juga sudah diolah menjadi kompos dan sebagian dijual ke pabrik untuk co-firing, sampah yang bisa dijadikan untuk tambahan batu bara, campuran batu bara.
And he actually part of the recycling program of the city. They are able to mobilize part of the recycled material to the coal plant and part of it to be recycled again.
Begitu juga kita untuk menjaga lingkungan kita ini mengurangi pemakaian plastik. Nah, plastik caranya ketika orang berbelanja dia membawa kantong sendiri. Nah, membawa kantong sendiri.
So in Solok City, there's no single-use plastic movement, so you have to carry your own bag when you go shopping.
Kemudian untuk menjaga lingkungan juga di kota Solok kita sudah melarang orang untuk merokok pada ruang-ruang publik. Ya, melarang rokok sehingga lingkungan kita itu bisa menjadi bersih. Kemudian termasuk memberi reward bagi orang yang berhenti merokok dalam bentuk uang. Ya, ini spesial bagi masyarakat yang kurang mampu.
He actually support no smoking movement in the city, and for the marginal community, he actually reward anyone that stops smoking. So there's like a payment.
Nih, dari kegiatan ini semuanya kita diakui oleh pemerintah pusat menjadi kota kecil yang terbersih. Sudah 5 kali dapat adipura. Ya.
In Indonesia, there is an award to be given to the small cities for those that kept that cleanliness, and Solok City has received 5 times in a row.
Nah, begitu pula kita juga sudah mendapatkan kota tersehat, kota kecil tersehat di Indonesia.
And this is something I think a lot of people have not much heard. One of the healthiest city. Because I think a lot of people always talk about clean and the wellness is not there.
Nah, itu adalah gambarnya adalah piala adipura yang dicerahkan oleh Menteri Lingkungan Hidup langsung.
That is from our Minister of Environment.
Yang ke-5 kali itu. Ya, habis. Udah, cukup. Nah, masih ada. Ya, barangkali itulah yang kita lakukan sehingga kita betul-betul berusaha menjaga kota ini ramah lingkungan yang terjaga, dan itu hanya bisa dilakukan secara bersama-sama.
And to be environmentally sustainable and to be socially responsible, it's needed a team effort. And as a mayor, he's been able to mobilize his citizens to join him as a community to do so.
Di sekolah, di masyarakat, dan di pemerintah sendiri.
And not just the government level, but also the society and the schools.
Yeah. Next. Kemudian ini.
This is one of some of the activities by the school.
Solok itu pertama bebas polusi, kemudian sampahnya zero waste, ya, kemudian ekosistemnya terjaga, kemudian kalau ada sampah pasti ada sampah, kemudian diolah menjadi hal-hal yang berguna dan bermanfaat, dan itu kita dukung dengan regulasi, dan regulasi ini termasuk regulasi sudah diatur dalam pembangunan jangka panjang, ya, 20 tahun, sehingga 20 tahun ke depan kebijakan ini tetap berlanjut.
Ini masuk ke tahun kedua ya Pak?
Ya.
So our mayor is sitting on his second term, and this is his values, and he has actually included it in his long-term 20 years regulation plan that will not be changed even after his second term.
Okay. Ya, ya. Itu lihat ada.
So everyone needs to come together and visit Solok City before the time is up.
Ya, kita harapkan. Ya, tadi sebelumnya lihat slide before, lihat sawah. Ada sebuah kita di Solok itu ada lahan sawah, paddy spell. Dan itu kita pertahankan dengan aturan, sudah ada regulasi, dan tidak boleh ada pembangunan di sana. Luasnya 1.000 hektar.
So the land before is actually 1,000 land hectare of paddy field that he had included in the regulation to not be developed. This is 1,000 hectares, and this is what I think legacy, and government, and he has such a kind, humble soul even sitting here. So I'm very happy that he's here to share his work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Now Dr. Nisha Kohli will give a token of appreciation. So next up on our agenda is a panel discussion, which will have Ms. Dessy and Ms. JP and Michela as the moderator.
Ms. JP is the head of ESG services and data modernization at SG Analytics. Ms. Dessy is an engineer and entrepreneur with over 18 years of experience in multiple sectors, including waste, energy, renewable energy, sustainable tourism, agriculture, energy, and aviation. She is the founder of the Sociopreneur Indonesia, a social enterprise that provides real-life experience to students in industry and society. A senior advisor and also a faculty member at the Central Bank of Indonesia. Please welcome them on stage.
Hello again. As you can feel, I'm very proud to be Indonesian today. I'm sharing the stage with some of the forefront champion that's trying to make our country better. So, Ms. Dessy, you founded Sociopreneur Indonesia and have been working with the government, including Bank of Indonesia and even the Ministry of Education. And Mr. Jayaprakash, you're also a chess player and passionate for generating actionable insights from data at Singapore Analytics. It's a huge data platform, management engagement. So data has been both your best friend for over 20 years. My question is, what has been your biggest inspiration and what has been the biggest transition and challenges in educations and skills and data?
Thank you, Miss Ella. It's a pleasure to be here and then sharing about what we are doing in Indonesia. Then it's one of that, actually what we are doing in Sociopreneur Indonesia, we founded in 2013. So why we founded it? Because it's like we want to promote what we call it responsible ecosystem. So what is responsible ecosystem? So the question is, that's where everyone, that's our visions about the future society, where everyone will take a role to solve the specific problem in their surrounding. And last year, I met with the mayor of Solok City. That's one of example what we work. So since our 2013 founded in 2013 until today, we work with more than 300 NPO, NGO, ministries, and local government. In Indonesia itself, there are more than 500 mayors, and we already work with 76 of them. And then, so what we want to see exactly like what the mayors did. That's about how to encourage them to create the sustainable innovations. Since 2013, we already connect all stakeholders to work and created more than 2,100 social innovation initiative and movement all over Indonesia. So that's what we are doing. Thank you.
Can you come again for the last part?
So what is your biggest inspiration so far, and what has been the biggest transition and challenges in education and skills?
Yeah, so I think one of the inspirations is that the kind of diversity that we have, that diversity both in terms of people making a difference as well as the set of goals that we have to achieve. Right, so that is a big inspiration, because you kind of life is all about bringing both of those together in meeting those larger objective. So having said that, sorry, I missed the second part.
So you can just share what.
Yeah, so I feel it is about skilling. It has to start right from the very beginning, starting from our homes, right? The way we teach our kids, and not just constrained to the schools or other modes of education or spreading awareness. I think that plays a huge role. In India, we believe that house is your first school, and mother is your first teacher. So I think that it all starts from there. I think that is, I think once you have right foundation and not use ChatGPT so much, I think we will really learn by ourselves.
Thank you. Ms. Dessy, how can a responsible ecosystem contribute to achieve the ESG goals, and some of the key considerations that, when designing a responsible ecosystem?
Actually, sometimes we have to go beyond that, talking about political lobbying, talking about the high level of words, and nobody knows about that, only certain of people knows about that. The examples is very important, the best practices is very important. At the end, we talk about action. And so many talk about over there, we can see in high level, we just discuss about hot topics, but no actions. So what we want to do in here when we talk about responsible ecosystem, what action you take? Even us, or each of us here in the round table sit here, we can contribute to make things better. Instead of we just sit in high level meetings and talk about that thing, about something is very hard to achieve sometimes. And we take times just to lobbying, but in fact, the time we use that just to argue on something, we can invest it into the real actions. So that's what we talk about a responsible ecosystem. And the fact is, there are a lot actions that already there, but not recognized by the standard. Because we create a matrix that hard to understand by the people who already practice it. I can say it here. A couple of years ago, we met with a numbers of farmers in Central Java. They already practice organic farming since 1970s, and nobody knows about them. And they already impact more than 1,200 farmers. They increase their not only access into the economy, access to getting better, access to, so the next farmers, they know how to use high tech. They already just stay at home and they use the technology for the farming. But because we have a standard and we not recognize those kind of things. And also like what the children did like in Solok City, we not recognize that, but actually that's the actions that already create something, impact, positive impact for the next generations. So for me, it's like how to design a responsible ecosystem, doable. Something doable that everyone can do it. So that's very simple. It's not need a political will to do that, but you need political will to make it happen in the long term. But to take an action, you just do it. Make it simple.
So, Mr. Jayaprakash, maybe this is something also you can suggest. Is there a simple way for you to attract and retain top talent in a competitive ESG job market? And how can professionals upskill themselves in this ESG world?
Sure. Now we are coming to the syllabus. Actually, the first question was out of syllabus. I was taken aback a little. So now this is something that I've prepared for, right? So I think attracting talent, I think, goes a long way in terms of the company or the organization that is recruiting needs to be sustainable first. We are in that era or generation where people really think about the organizations, people's, institutions they associate themselves with. So it is extremely important from that point of view for the organization to be sustainable. And in terms of for the people who are going to join the organization, there should be, the incentive is mainly in the form of their growth and development in terms of the learning they get, the sort of exposure they have, and so on. The sort of projects that are available that for somebody who's starting the career, what sort of opportunities do they have to learn something new, and how our role is not just confined to one aspect of work. A lot of us prefer joining big fours or larger consulting firms because you get exposed to the entire cycle of body of work. So that is another way, have an ecosystem within the organization where people naturally progress from, simpler work to more value-added work. I think that is another key thing that one has to keep in mind. And there are ways we should make use of the social media very well in this generation, in these times, so that we kind of attract the top talent, and associations with education institutions. In SG Analytics, we kind of work with a lot of education institutions because we have a lot of ESG data work that we do. We work for larger rating agencies. We work as a data engine behind them. And as you all know, the data becomes the foundation for any rating to be developed. So from that perspective, we work with a lot of education institutions and ask them to include certain aspects in their curriculum. So this actually makes a natural way for us to bring in talent into the organization.
And for Ms. Dessy, I want to know more on the strategy, and when you design a model that businesses can actually incorporate responsible ecosystem to minimize their ESG exposure, and at the same time to increase talent and also the way they can implement them.
Okay. One initiative that we done since 2015, what we call it MSD, multi-stakeholder dialogue. So we bring all together academic, business, government, and society to sit in the same, like the panels in here. We talk about the same thing. Because the main issues is like, because we not speak in the same language. So the same language, I mean like here, we talk actually about the same thing, but we have different way to deliver it. But by let you be in the same panels, talk about that, it can make a consensus. And over 2015, we already work with local government, central bank, and also with our new, currently, since last year, I lead a team in Ministry of Education, and because he has a program for transform higher education to give more impact. Then we sit down together and then to bring the academics not to talk only about your journal and things and then put in Scopus, but to put that exactly directly into the real problems. While the business itself is not just talking about like the metrics because they market and everything, but they also have to think also about the other side, because all of us talk different languages, although we talk about the same thing, so we need to sit and then so we start to understand each other languages. We have what we call it social empathy. The social empathy make us take actions together. So that's the consensus we start. A lot of projects grow up after that one. So the strategy is sit together, make them talk to each other, understand each other, and make commitment after that, and make a project together, collaborative project for sustainability.
So, this is something so simple, yet I'm sure everyone here can say it's the hardest thing. We want to, just your biggest takeaway, what will be the future outlook for the landscape in the sustainable and responsible ecosystem and ESG? And, kind of like maybe your advice for what we hope to see in the talent pool in the future.
I think one of the, it's been extremely informative session since morning, right? If you have to implement all of those, what we've been hearing and, bring all of that together, the talent pool of future will have to embrace all of that, right? The ecosystem meaning the organizations and different stakeholder groups, right? The consumers, the employees, and the investors have to come together, have that unity of focus in their thought process. At the same time, the regulators or the governments, which we see these days, they're coming up with regulations that actually are helping this entire journey for all of us. That has to become more robust, and it has to be also very detailed. As of now, we all know there are so many things, we have to be, for us to be sustainable, we need to achieve net zero. We have to be carbon neutral. These are all just within the climate space. There are so many jargons and there's so many terms that are coined, and they keep getting coined every day. I think we need to simplify it for common people to understand what sustainability is, and we have to make it a way of our life, way of our education, way of our work. I think if we kind of bring all of this together, rest of the components, as I told you, the governments or the regulators, everyone else will just support that cause. I think that's what I think we should focus on. In terms of talent, my tip for the talent of future or the current generation is talent has to be kind of upskilled in three different categories, three different levels: technical, technological, as well as in terms of communication or soft skills wise, right? So we all understand different aspects of sustainability, but without technology we can not scale or bring in efficiencies. I think we have to keep that in mind. At the same time, most of the companies today, the problem they are facing is they're unable to communicate some of the good work they're doing. That is in the form of their sustainability reports. Some have ambition to make an integrated reports and so on. I think if the talent of the future focus on these three things, I think they'll be, as Mr. Vander Zenat said in the morning, there's a huge shortage of talent pool. I think that will address some of it, and also will also make this world a better place to live.
Okay, so what I'm thinking in here, if you're asking, am I optimistic about the future? Yes, I am. Why? It's very simple. I've been travel many places in Indonesia, work with indigenous until the government. If everyone sit together, talk with the same language, make a consensus and take actions, we can create a better future. So that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also like to say, if anyone knows anyone in the fishing and marine, send them to me. We speak the same language. It's time to connect in the island communities. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful session. Please stay on stage because Mr. Rajiv Rawat will present a token of appreciation. Thank you. So next up on our agenda is a fireside chat session with Dr. Nisha Kohli and Mr. Paddy Balfour. Please welcome
I
on
know
stage.
we are off the agenda in terms of timing, but this session is going to be interesting. I'll tell you why. So, yes, welcome. Shall we? Okay, we are at the right place.
Does that work?
Yeah. Does it work?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yeah. So, as you all are aware, at Copstage we've organized this. So I've been talking to, various speakers in different countries to request them, convince them to come here. So while I was having a chat with Paddy about, what he does and the things that they do as with an organization, I was actually a couple of years back, I came to know about ACRE and I was very impressed. So ACRE is a recruitment, primarily, as known as recruitment searching firm for sustainability professionals. For over 20 years, they have been doing that in the impact and sustainability space. So while I was talking with him, he mentioned that they also do leadership development and they have developed a tool for assessment, and I really was intrigued, and I said, I want to sit with you on the fireside chat and ask you more questions, because I myself come from the governance field, and it's important to do capacity building and real implementation in corporates, and that's why this fireside chat. So thank you very much for your patience. So Paddy, I would like you to introduce yourself first before I do it, I keep talking.
Thank you, Nisha. I think one of the benefits of travel, and obviously coming to places like Bangkok, is to appreciate that everyone views sustainability through their own reference point. I grew up in a place called Fife in Scotland. As part of a farming family who'd farmed the same area for nearly 700 years, and I think had a background in stewardship, land stewardship, environmental stewardship, community stewardship. and commercial stewardship. I've gone on to, obviously, to work in the executive search world for the last 20 years, the majority of which has been in Asia Pacific. I spent time in Australia, spent time in Hong Kong. I'm now based in Singapore. And I joined ACRE, as Nisha said, we're a UK headquartered executive search, recruitment and advisory firm who had been working globally in the sustainability space for 20 years, but didn't have people in Asia Pacific. So I came to join the business to hopefully provide some of that regional nuance and expertise and experience.
So, Paddy, recently we have been hearing about talent wars and green talent situations, and since morning today we have heard about this, that we do need to focus on the talent development and upskilling and, in various sessions. So what's the current landscape that you are seeing in this space? And are those really talent wars, or we need to really develop people? I mean,
I think the word that immediately comes to mind is complex. The talent situation in terms of sustainability is not, it's not one-dimensional. I think that, and some of the discussions we've seen already, is that there is clearly a shortage of people or a shortage of talent in relation to the jobs that are being hired. I think I would phrase it slightly differently. There's a misalignment between the talent and the roles that people are looking to hire. I think that if you look at, and you go back sort of 5-10 years, I think sustainability was either within, as I would describe it, the not-for-profit space, the altruistic space. And I think if you looked in the corporate space, it was probably devalued. It was more of an operational role. And I think, again, some of the discussions have talked to that. What we've seen and happened pretty dramatically over the last couple of years is the value being placed on individuals within the corporate space to make corporates more sustainable has increased in value dramatically. You've also seen the growth of what I would look as sort of the organizations that are looking to capitalize on the commercial opportunities of sustainability. And I think that is clearly valued in a completely different way. So when we look at individuals, I think that being able to articulate whether someone is looking at it altruistically, commercially, or whether someone is looking at managing an internal function, and the way that individuals look at themselves, I think has changed as well. I think that presents a lot of problems in terms of things like compensation. One of the challenges of the growth in this space has been in the not-for-profit sector, because they can't afford to be able to pay for the talent that they need. I think that some organizations are valuing sustainability talent much higher than others, but they're also requiring a lot more value to be provided by those individuals, which requires a completely different mindset. So I think that what we have is a very complex talent market, a very challenging talent market, but one that also presents opportunities, and ultimately is a good thing if we look at the growth and importance.
Okay, thank you. And lately we have been seeing in companies, where there is a shortage of talent, we've been seeing that marketing people, or marketing communications people, or let's say CSR department has been converted into sustainability, right? So there is clearly, as you mentioned, is misalignment, and in terms of, I think, competencies as well. But as you mentioned about your proprietary assessment, behavioral assessment tool, does that help in assessing those competencies which we require, particularly for the sustainability department? And in your experience, how much is sustainability department staffed? I have heard hardly any. I mean, it's not the balanced staffing. So please throw some light on that, about the tool first and then the understaffing of that department.
I think that we touched on earlier, I think the evolution of the CSO function from being operational, CSR-led, perhaps sat as part of a human resources team or something like that. The next layer up in terms of communications, marketing, investor relations. and then ultimately where you're placing it as part of the very sort of strategy of an organisation. And I think that the skill set needed in those different roles at a leadership level is quite different. The proprietary tool that we have, which is a psychometric assessment tool that measures chief sustainability officers to essentially around a core of 8 different competencies around their ability to step into that leadership role. Interestingly, none of those competencies are technical, because I think that what is really, and the basis of those competencies is based on interviews and research with over 200 chief sustainability officers globally, so this is not just in Asia Pacific, and mapping those competencies on whether someone has got the ability to do that. Sustainability is an incredibly broad function, and you will have seen that in terms of the guests that we've got here today. Everyone comes from very, very different backgrounds, and therefore you don't necessarily have a clear-cut view of where a chief sustainability officer will come from. It's very much around the humility to understand what you do know and what you don't know, and therefore being able to lead. And I was speaking to someone about this today, which is if you look at the chief sustainability officer function in relation to a chief technology officer or a chief financial officer, a CFO will probably come from a finance background, but he or she might not necessarily be an accountant. They might be a banker. They might be a management consultant. If you look at a chief technology officer, they will grow. They may not be able to build and code themselves. What they provide is leadership. And I think what we endeavour to use with a psychometric tool is identify individuals who've got that ability to lead and the humility to be able to bring the right skill sets together. The next question you ask around the team structures and how you build that, I think what you can then do is build a collaborative team to be able to deliver on the outcomes that you're looking for. And that, for me, is essential when it's building team structures. You don't find everything in an individual. You need to be able to provide complementary team members and structures and provide, and again, ultimately using talent management tools to be able to map that to ensure that you get the right skill sets in a team environment. Essentially, they're all understaffed, I think would be my first view, and that's beginning to evolve.
Exactly.
But in Asia Pacific, absolutely they're understaffed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree to that point. And some of the organizations have actually created practice groups, right, with different departments, and then that's how they work with the sustainability department. After doing that assessment, how do you activate those leadership potential or those competencies in the managers, for the development?
I think, again, this is something that's sort of been touched on so far, is that this region is short of sustainability leaders. There aren't enough sustainability leaders for the organisations that we've got, and therefore we need to upskill and develop those leaders who perhaps have some of the technical competencies but don't have the non-technical competencies. So what we have is a team of coaches, in essence, to be able to work individually with future leaders to equip them with the tools, to be able to make that step up. Again, I think what's different, and we're a human capital consultancy, we're not a technical consultancy. So the training and development that we do is often in conjunction with technical players, and we don't try and step in and provide that technical advice. What it is about giving them the soft skills to be able to advance and grow. And I think that particularly when you see very technically proficient professionals in sustainability who will then go and join the corporate world, the ability to influence and actually get anything done can be incredibly frustrating. And there can be a misalignment on how do we actually make change? How do we understand what a commercial organisation is trying to do?
Exactly.
And boiling down to that initial question of why do they need a sustainability leader? What are they trying to achieve from this?
Yeah.
So we help leaders, we equip leaders with some of the soft skills to be able to develop that. But we're looking at it purely from a sustainability perspective. So that's what I think is quite unique. And where it's advantageous here in Asia is that, and this is one of the reasons why I work for the organisation that I do, is that there aren't many executive search, recruitment, talent management firms with 20 years of track record. And having watched the evolution of the sustainability function over that period of time, in Asia, where we're slightly newer to the discussion, but are probably moving faster, it's being able to learn from some of those lessons, to be able to skip steps, to be able to accelerate things. Because I think we all appreciate we're working with a ticking clock here, and we need to go faster. So any tool that enables you to go faster and to be more effective, I think is a positive.
Actually, you answered my next question already. So I was going to... No, it was not there in the syllabus. It was brewing in my mind. So my question, actually, what I wanted to ask was that after developing the leadership, like activating this potential and skills and all that, I mean, you focused already that you focus, I mean, the focus is on the change management, the leadership skills, right? And that's what I think personally as a challenge, because it's easier to organize ESG programs, capacity building programs, but then after giving that education, it's important to bring the change management and transformation within the organization, because acceptability down from top to the bottommost level may vary, and that's a big challenge that I see in corporates.
100%, and I think we look at that as a description of what we call last mile integration, is that you have a centralized ESG sustainability. It can be in a corporate, it can be in a bank, but it's that last piece. It's how do you embed sustainability into the finance team, the IT team, the compliance team, the HR team. How do you get an organization to point in the right direction? And I think that is the next stage of talent development, is equipping non-sustainability professionals with the sustainability skills to be impactful, to be able to drive change, and to, as you said, it's a transition.
Yes.
It's not it's not an initial thing. It's not A to B. You have to transition our way there.
Yeah. I would like to ask you one last question, which is a very important one for corporates. Your advice to companies to move farther and faster in these terms of sustainable talent development overall.
I think that the most important part is in terms of, and I touched to a certain degree on this, which is upskilling a whole organization. Mm-hmm. So I think that upskilling everyone across an organization is the first part, but more important than that is actually upskilling boards and sort of C-suite executive level leadership. One of the biggest blockers that we see for organizations in sustainability, and this is from the first discussion we have today, is at the board level. And I think when you're comparing a board of a publicly listed organization on the FTSE, for example, in the UK, that's very different from both the publicly and privately private businesses in this part of the world. And being able to upskill at the board level, I think, is essential to be able to drive a quicker adoption. Once you've got that board level, I think it's then looking at things like secondments, of taking people from outside of sustainability and embedding them in a sustainability team and then back out again. It's internship programs at both the bachelor and the master's degree level to be able to identify mid-career people to bring in that skill set. I think it's about ensuring that the narrative in an organization, the last panel that we had, I think, said that we need sustainable businesses as an attraction. I would disagree slightly. I think it's much more about the narrative. It's about a business going and changing. And interestingly, we see some of the most talented sustainability professionals wanting to work for what I would describe as the bad actors. Because if you can take an organization, a very heavy polluting energy business, and you can move the dial by even 5% on that, the impact that you can have is huge. But what you need is a narrative that comes from the board level all the way through, that change is going to be driven and that there is support. So how do you accelerate it? It's creating that narrative from the top down.
Totally agree with that, because commitment of resources comes from the top and the board level, and then taking initiatives only from sustainability managers or middle level, other level managers is difficult. So getting the mindset and the behavior change at the top level is the key, and I agree with that. That was really insightful, and yeah, I just can't, if I keep talking, I'll just keep asking you questions. So but we've been running very late, so, and we have an important function. I mean, 7 o'clock we have that gala dinner as well. So in that light, thank you so much, and we'll keep continuing our chats in the later sessions. Thank you very much, Paddy. Thanks.
My pleasure. If anyone has any questions, come and find me.
Yes, please. Yeah. Any questions for Paddy?
So next up, this participant will be joining us online via Zoom. He is Mr. Sasja Beslik, and he will be presenting a keynote speech.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here, and I hope you can hear me well. My name is Sasja Beslik. I'm head of Chief Operating Officer, basically, for investment fund in Japan called NextGen ESG Japan. The investment platform based out of Tokyo, investing in sustainable solutions, both in mid-cap Japanese companies on the listed side, but also in venture capital angle, and also some of the growth funds that we are doing on the climate side, including the agro fund that we are running in terms of the investments in solutions for agricultural sector in relation to sustainability. I've been listening to some of the debates and the latest fire chat about sustainability and the role of chief sustainability officers and the way how the sustainability agenda can be advanced. I would like to address a couple of things today. The first thing is that it's related to ESG ratings and discrimination of emerging markets from the ESG rating providers angle, which I think is relevant. The second point I would like to address is the lack of the link between the ESG ratings and the ESG performance of the companies, including their targets with financial performance of the companies and the financial targets. And the third point is the challenges forward in terms of the adaptation and mitigation of climate change issues, especially in developing countries and in the regions that do not have sufficient capital to meet some of these challenges going forward. So to start with, let's focus a bit on the ESG rating landscape and non-place-based ratings. What I mean by that, to be very clear, is that the current ESG ratings that are constructed in the Western world, including the US and Great Britain, and in some instances in continental Europe, are developed on the basis of understanding and understanding of the key issues that are relevant for businesses in the Western Hemisphere, and have very little understanding and very little appreciation of what is relevant for companies operating out of Indonesia, and what I call a place-based ESG issues that are relevant to Indonesian company or Thai company or Vietnamese company in the region where they operate. Most of these companies are either part of the supply chain where they deliver goods and services to Western companies to the value chain. And most of the challenges, ESG challenges related to these companies are actually place-based. They are not global in the sense that if the company in Indonesia has a non-executive representative that is not according to governance standards in Europe or US appropriate position for the company, they will be downgraded or they will get a rating that is not related to actually the place-based issues that are relevant for the company itself. So I think it's what you will see going forward, and this is probably what's going to happen in a big parts of the emerging markets, is that you will see a lot of local rating agencies, and I think that's a good development because the ESG is not one size fits all. It's a different perspectives that can bring forward understanding of how companies can tackle transition of their business models and tackle the key elements of what is relevant for their business. So I really look forward in 3 to 5 years to see the local Indonesian ESG ratings, and in particular, these place-based ratings will be relevant for the mid-cap segment of the companies that we are looking to invest in across the world, not only we, but also many others. And I think the biggest sort of the pink elephant in the room in the ESG space is the mid-cap segment, or small and medium-sized companies across the world, that are the bulk of the change that needs to happen. And particularly in the emerging markets, this will be relevant. Now, in terms of the ESG strategies deployed by company and financial targets, I can tell you that I recently done quite a big research together with a partner based out of Singapore called RIB, ESG provider, and they have helped me to look at the 15 largest brands across the world and look at the way how these brands are linking the ESG strategies, including the climate targets, with their financial targets, and in addition to that, with the cost base of the company growth. And the funny sort of a conclusion of this is that only one out of the 15 companies that we looked at has a clear link between the ESG strategy they have deployed and communicated with the financial targets. And there is, in many cases, and I would say most of the cases, no link to the cost base. So what it means in the financial terms for us that are financial investors, it means that we have big difficulties to understand what ESG as approach deployed by company with the strategy, let's say climate neutral strategy 2045. What does it mean in the financial terms, in terms of the company having targets to grow 2 to 4% on an annual basis? And what actually does it mean for the cost base of the company in terms of the covering the cost and allocating the resources to tackle that transition? So what this tells you is that ESG is still very much on the margins of the core business and is in many cases perceived and I think also communicated, although in Europe we have a regulation, in a very, I would say, descriptive way, not really tackling the core underlying business drivers of the company. And I think this is something that will change going forward. And the more opportunity, but also the more focused companies will get in terms of linking the financial growth. If they're going to grow 2%, it's good to understand what does it mean in terms of the ESG strategy they have deployed and they are using, but also what does it mean in terms of the cost base and the cost drivers they have and how these cost drivers will be impacted by this. So this is a sort of the holy trinity of ESG, where you have ESG strategy on one side, you have financial strategy on another side, and then you have cost drivers that are actually trying to link these things together. Whatever we think about it, I think as long as we don't have the ESG clearly linked to the financial growth of the companies and the cost drivers explained in a way how they support this, we are still gonna basically perceiving the ESG space as add-on and not as the core sort of element of the business transition. And the third thing, which I think is also relevant to sort of mention, is that the increasing emissions around the world, and I think this year will most likely hit the the sort of targets that are very sort of bad from climate emergency perspective. We are increasing our CO2 emissions across the world, although in some places like in Europe, they are flattening out. But in general, it doesn't look as we are going to be able to make some of the targets that have been set in Paris. And I think that will have a tremendous impact on many countries around the world, especially countries in developing space, in the developing area. And I think also the mitigation and adaptation way of how these countries and companies are developing the ability to tackle this and importance of this will increase. And I think you will most likely in the future also within the ESG space, especially within the E, have adaptation ratings, and you may have also mitigation ratings. Although mitigation is most likely part of the current ESG rating model, I think what you will see most likely going forward is the adaptation and also the link between adaptation and financial value of the company and the way how these companies can grow and develop. What I can see from my sort of experience, I've been in this space since 2004. I've launched the first Swedish climate neutral equity fund 2007, many years ago, when this was a topic that basically nobody was talking about in the world. It is a big thing today. Everybody's talking about it, and quite clearly, there's a huge business opportunity on the investment side. However, with that said, as you probably know, the many of the, at least in the European Union, funds that have been rated as top ESG funds have been downgraded by certain providers. So MSCI has downgraded from 20% of triple A rated ESG funds to 0.2, which gives you a bit of a flavor how the investment part of the transition is still not doing what it's supposed to do. And this is something that I think regulation in many cases will change and improve. And it's also forcing the asset managers to revise and evaluate the way how they use ESG, both in the way how they allocate capital, but also in the way how they communicate with the stakeholders, including their clients. So I think to be positive about the future is, of course, the human sort of attribute in a discussion. Of course, there are a lot of things that we can still do in order to address this. And I think from my sort of investment angle and that experience, I think the biggest sort of a challenge and the biggest business opportunity is to get small, medium-sized enterprises across the world, including developing markets, to really and help them to really shift their business models. And with these words, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I apologize if the sound is a bit bad or if I was unclear, and I wish you all the best in your conference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sasja Beslik.
Now we're going to move on to a panel session. So I would like to invite our esteemed panelists to the stage. Please welcome Mr. Greg Blackwood, founder of Genuine Interest, a successful private equity investor and project innovator, who has collaborated with prominent companies such as Mitsui, Chevron, and UPS. Also joining us is Mr. Luca Bernardinetti, chairman and managing partner of Mahankorn Partners Group, an authority on infrastructure financing and public-private partnership projects. Lastly, we have Mr. Johan Fall, a French technology entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of GetLinks, who is passionate about leveraging technology to create a positive impact.
And by the time we have speakers on the stage and the moderator, we can have 1 or 2 questions with Mr. Sasja Beslik.
Yes, please.
Hi, Sasja. It's great to see you, and you've been an inspiration. I was part of the study that you conducted back in 2015 about AstraZeneca supply chain in India, part of the extended team then. So good to see you. One question I have is regarding the current traditional risk-based ratings versus impact-based ratings. What are your thoughts, briefly, if you can share? Which is better? What should the investor look for, and so on? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great to see you and listen to you previously. And I think the engagement that we did back in the time with the pharma industry in India has changed the European regulation. So that was a big, big engagement case we actually did back in the days when I was working for Nordea. I think, you know, the current rating models that we have, and this is a big challenge for investors around the world, and it's actually a big challenge for companies too, is that they are based on the sort of a corporate conduct side. So there is no link between products and services. There is no link between the financial targets. So impact ratings, including what I said earlier, place-based sort of understanding of the context. So how is this company managing or tackling the challenges related to climate change or other social issues like workforce or supply chain? How do they actually do that in the context of Indonesia? What's the impact they can create? What's the financial value of that? That's not part of the current fabric of the ratings, and that needs to change. To be honest, I think the current ESG ratings as we have them in the world are counterproductive in what we would like to achieve with a sustainable transition. So I think this needs to change. It's most likely will change. It will take some time, but it's clearly sort of putting the direction where we need to go. We need to have much more impact rating in terms of what's the net impact of the business from throughout the products and services they deploy versus their corporate conduct and versus their financial targets.
Thank you. Yeah, we now start the panel with Dessy as moderator. Thank you.
Hi again. Okay, so I'm here to continue to talk about continuing today's sessions with more focus on sustainable finance. So in here I have three experts who will talk more about sustainable finance, and also that's the projects they are financing with. And before that, I'm not going to introduce them because it's better them to introduce themselves, better than me. Okay, so gentlemen, please, your time to talk about what you're doing, and then give us all explanations about yours. Please.
Hi everybody. I'm John Fall, General Partner of Atlas Capital. So we are a venture capital, a VC based here in Southeast Asia. Our fund is incorporated in Singapore. We invested mainly in the US in climate technology. So we have 9 investments under our belt, alongside with some of the large family offices and conglomerates here in Southeast Asia. And our thesis is to bring European and US innovation in Southeast Asia to accelerate the decarbonization of the region, as well as the climate adaptation of the region. So pleasure to be here and looking forward to have a great discussion.
Thank you, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luca Bernardinetti, Managing Partner at Mahana Partners Group, MPG. We are a multidisciplinary professional services firm with 5 divisions. I oversee the business of the firm, but specifically I work in our banking and finance division, which is involved in, amongst other things, sustainable finance. We work in capital project and infrastructure financing, public-private partnerships, and a number of other initiatives that are both involving the private sector and the government. So I will delve into that more specifically throughout this discussion.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Blackwood, and for the past 10 years, I've been running a small bottom-of-the-pyramid fund called Genuine Interest, and we work with mostly INSEAD MBA alumni in 4 countries, Thailand, Cambodia, Senegal, and Sierra Leone, to help them scale their platforms on the debt side, not the equity side, for the benefit of bottom-of-the-pyramid entrepreneurs in these countries. And about 5 years ago, I also became a member of the National University of Singapore's Investment Committee, looking at technologies, a lot of those having to do with sustainability, carbon capture, and other similar environmental technologies, which led to my taking a position earlier this year as an entrepreneur in residence focused on social finance and environmental finance at Citigroup in Singapore. So depending on which way the questions go, I may wear one or more of those hats. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much for introducing you. But I will start the questions from Luca first. Then, because it's before I go in deep about sustainable finance, and here, because we are here in Thailand, and they adopting biocircular economy framework. And could you tell us how is Thailand embracing the concept of biocircular economy framework, and what are the potential economic and environmental benefits for the country?
Well, it's a very in-depth, it's a very ingrained concept in Thailand, the BCG economy model. There's been many initiatives, and Thailand's been one of the most vocal advocates in Southeast Asia for sustainability and for adopting the BCG economy model. There are many examples, not only in sustainable finance, that I can speak of. I don't know how much we have, but to name a few, the bio economy. Thailand has been advocating and incentivizing through policies, through incentives of many natures, many different types of public sector incentives to incentivize investment in renewable energy. So talking about solar, biomass, biogas, biofuels, chemicals. So this is one of the pillars of the BCG economic model in Thailand. Circular economy, there's a lot of, there are many initiatives in recycling, waste management. We have recently published an update about the waste management initiatives that Thailand has, in terms of policies, Thailand has rolled out. So many companies obtain investment incentives for being sustainable and socially and environmentally conscious. So there are many different types of policies. I would say that if you're familiar with Thailand, you're probably familiar with a government agency called the Board of Investment. So that is the government agency that oversees the specific sustainable related policies in terms of non-tax and tax incentives. So amongst the many incentives that companies obtain is, for example, exemption from payment of corporate income tax, exemption from import duty for raw materials, or for example, having smarter ways of granting work permits for experts that are in the sustainable industry to come and work in Thailand without all the red tape that normally is associated with immigration. So there are many different types of incentives. So again, if you have more specific questions, I won't want to take too much time, but it's at the core of the government policies, or also Thailand 4.0. There are many interesting incentives and many policies geared towards decarbonization. There are incentives for the private sector to reduce the carbon footprint for factories producing. Thailand is the manufacturing hub of ASEAN. Many companies from Asia Pacific, from Europe, from North America produce and manufacture in Thailand. So there is a very large manufacturing presence in Thailand. Also, on the government side, public facilities, infrastructure such as economic infrastructure, railways, highways, airports. You may be familiar with the Eastern Economic Corridor spanning across 3 provinces in Thailand, Chiang Sao, Chonburi, and Rayong. There is massive investment, talking about trillions of US dollars in terms of infrastructure investment. So infrastructure is the first layer of investment or FDI in probably in any region in the world. Specifically in Thailand, investment infrastructure is geared towards connecting Thailand with the Mekong region, with China as well. And all these investment in infrastructure enjoy a number of incentives for their sustainable aspect. More on that later. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luca. And if I want to elaborate that one, if we go into the more about technology, because you're more invest into it, and then how do you see if, like, with the BCG framework and also in sustainable finance here in Thailand itself? Okay, I will talk just about in Thailand itself. And how do you see the risk of that in terms of the financings, those kind of projects here in Thailand? Okay. Yeah, please.
I'm afraid I'm not a Thailand expert.
Okay.
And if I understood the question correctly, it has to do with financing of technologies that are involved in carbon capture, carbon sequestration, things like this. So the Singapore government, which is something that I can speak to, is very famous for a number of incentives that it has rolled out over decades to help universities in particular, especially graduate students, PhDs, and professors, attempt to commercialize technologies that they've come up with. And many of these are materials technologies. Some of them more recently have been deep tech, but I think that's less applicable. There are some initiatives in the Web3 space to attempt to put together various digital ledger technologies, public ledger technologies for the purpose of accounting and audit and provenance as well. But I think those are typically not the ones that are incentivized by grants and other types of government schemes, at least in Singapore. Singapore prefers materials technology. Singapore prefers other industrial approaches to sequestration. And I have personal opinions about nature-based approaches to that versus machinery-based approaches, let's say. But it seems to be the case that nature-based approaches are not currently well understood enough to be the types of approaches that are attracting incentives for this, this type of sequestration or generation of carbon offsets and the like.
I could address the question from the Thailand standpoint. There are three aspects that I would like to highlight. We're talking about sustainable finance, so we're talking about banks and financial institutions. There is clearly, for all the projects that are submitted to banks and financial institutions for their assessment of the project viability, one of the merits for the creditworthiness assessment is the sustainability. And this is already happening, so the banks are actually looking at the sustainable aspect for the business. So are they environmentally sustainable? There are several factors, and then later on I'm going to speak also about smart cities, for example. Several factors that are considered by banks and financial institutions alike to assess the merits of a project before even assessing their financial viability. Second aspect, as I mentioned, there are incentives for specific industries, and I can think of one. It is last year I was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, discussing about the 10 ASEAN member states and the incentives, the policies, the frameworks that the 10 countries in ASEAN have come up with in terms of incentivizing the private sector to invest in electric vehicles. Out of 10 countries, Thailand has the most incentives by far. There are many European and Japanese companies in Thailand that produce cars. Many of those are producing electric vehicles. So there is investment in electric vehicles, there is an investment in different types of vehicles. For example, now they produce electric motorcycles, electric boats, and what have you, but also investment for companies that invest in EV infrastructure. So this is what is lacking at the moment. not only in Thailand, but in the overall region. So electric vehicles, infrastructure, and then there is a third aspect. Last year, we worked on a project with, I think many of you who are here may have seen that there are electric buses in Bangkok as of last year. So these projects have been enjoying a number of government incentives because BOI projects, tax exemptions for the private sector proponent that proposed this project to the Metropolitan Authority of Bangkok. Secondly, eased financing conditions. So terms and conditions for banks to issue lines of credit to specifically the companies that have environmentally friendly projects are much lower. The interest rate and all the conditions are much better than for what we call traditional finance. And then there's a third aspect, carbon credits. So we work with a number of foundations. There's one specific foundation in Switzerland, no names, but they're basically acquiring carbon credits. So this is ongoing financing throughout the life cycle of the product, because the company that has produced and delivered EV buses in Bangkok, which are now slowly but steadily substituting the existing obsolete buses in the city, are producing quantifiable reduction of carbon emissions. And these are carbon credits which are bought by this foundation. So there's a number of incentives, again, private sector, public sector, working together. This is what I would call a semi-PPP project. But there are a number of other incentives throughout the life cycle of the project.
Yeah, I can know that you share your opinion. I can share my opinion. I'm a bit blunt on this one, so I wanted you guys to start, and thank you for illuminating us with this. So I'm going to share names because I think it's okay. And we work closely with Click Foundation and Energy Absolute, who are the one who founded this EV buses in Bangkok, and this is great. This is a good initiative. There's a few initiatives, in that space, but to be honest, we're way behind. If you compare, of course, the FDI in Thailand, EV is the fastest growing FDI in Thailand now, so it's great. We're going to see a lot of investment into this, but in terms of actual projects, there's really not much going on. And that's why two of our friends here were mentioning about Singapore, Malaysia successfully, but in Thailand, if you look at the number of projects, there's not much. But there is incentives, there is subsidies coming, there's an interest. I hope people in the room are here because they want to do something. They are looking to invest or maybe build something together. But yeah, compared to other regions, we're way behind. The few projects that we see for Thailand specifically and their opportunity are in biochar. So storing CO2 by in the agriculture. I think biochar is something that you're going to hear a lot more. Of course, the infrastructure of EV is going to be developed. We've seen BYD being brought to Thailand by Siam Motors. So that was a very big move, and probably like 10% of the foreign direct investments came from just that deal, right? So BYD is the largest EV manufacturer in China. You don't realize the size of this company until I tell you that their waiting list for EVs is 7 times bigger than Tesla, right? So that's just the scale of it, right? And so this company now entering Thailand through a joint venture with Siam Motors was a very big deal for the country and for the next 10 years ahead. So EV, of course, is going to be there. But yeah, biochar, agriculture. But also when you think about this, Thailand was hit by a heat wave a month ago, right? So a lot of people, don't realize. But when you talk about decarbonization, climate change, climate technologies, you're talking about resilience, right? So Thailand, of course, is a country that is prone to sea rise. Bangkok, is a famous city for that. Floods, right? Once a year, at least, we get this flooding, and heat waves. So the question then is, what are the inevitable infrastructures that are going to be needed investment, right? And of course, the energy infrastructure, which Thailand today is, 85% or oil and gas, basically, that dependence doesn't make the country actually resilient to climate events, right? And that's why you can see power outage quite often, right? So that infrastructure needs to be upgraded, right? With the decentralization of the grid, better management of the grid, better maintenance of the grid, and also better usage of the electricity in the buildings themselves, right? I mean, who here can live without the aircon running all day? Right? Please raise your hand if you haven't, used the aircon for more than a month, right? Probably nobody, right? It's just too hot here. So can you imagine living a week without your aircon because there's been a flood and your power have been run out in your building? It's possible, right? So of course there is money that's going to be going to this area, right? And we see a lot of opportunity in there. Building retrofitting, right? New materials, replacement of the aircon, right? Better energy management in the building. I think this is where we see a couple of projects on side of the EV. So yeah, I would say EV is number one opportunity for Thailand specifically. Number two is the agriculture and the industry reform. I think Thailand is observing what India have been observing 50 years ago, right? A reindustrialization in the agriculture space, and there's a lot to be done and a lot of money to be made as well. All sustainable, of course. And thirdly is the retrofitting and the new built environment. I think these are the three areas I will look at.
Thank you so much. And it's also like you've specifically said, the opportunity for Thailand to grow. But here I want to come back to Greg and I'm asking more about that. How do you see is like green finance, sustainable finance, enable cities to achieve long-term sustainability? We already talk about that, but in your perspective, if you're financing it, and then how does it can change, and then how to transform it? Is it possible to transform it to become more sustainable with the invest here?
So a bit of background on that from a kind of a macro perspective. Right now across Southeast Asia, the energy industry accounts for about 44% of emissions, and 41%, another 41%, is contributed by the sinks, mostly rainforests that are being cleared for various industries. And this is globally going to be a huge problem because Southeast Asia has about 3% of the land area, but it's got about, I think, 18% or so of the world's sinks. So that's going to be a much larger problem for the world. And when I personally look at sustainable finance, there are various different projects and there are various different approaches. At a macro level, I would like to look at projects and approaches that are actually going to move the needle by 2030. And most of those have to do with power generation and infrastructure, as well as storage and transmission. One of the large problems in Southeast Asia is that you have countries like Singapore and Brunei that will never ever be able to produce enough renewable energy to satisfy their needs. But then you have huge areas of potential renewable energy production, mostly in solar and wind, in places like Kalimantan or other largely rural parts of Southeast Asia. So there's a huge geographic mismatch, and there's also really, as Joanne pointed out, the transmission infrastructure sometimes doesn't exist. Where it exists, it's old, needs to be maintained, and wind and solar often need to be stored, and the cost-effective battery technology is just not there. Coal is cheaper, right? So all of these are incredible issues. Sasja, I believe, spoke to something that I wanted to address, which is what we see often is a mismatch between the financial metrics that are used to assess the viability of a loan or an equity side investment. It's very difficult for many financial institutions, and Luke, I'd love to hear about how the Thai banks are doing it. But I think it's very, very difficult for many financial institutions to plug into their risk and return models various ESG related criteria, right? So what is the financial value? And what that ends up doing is it produces a misalignment between risk and return metrics, such that many of these impact investments, you're comparing apples to jet planes, but the models try to compare apples to apples, and many of these impact investments just don't stack up because ESG metrics aren't able to be included. I think one of the additional nails in the coffin is that net zero is being presented as a cost. It's something that companies will do and governments will do because maybe there's social shame involved in not making your target. Maybe there's a financial penalty of some sort. Maybe there's a tax. I would be interested to see, and various people are exploring ideas, to see this turned around to potentially become an asset on a balance sheet somewhere, right? Or a positive incentive. So when we look at investments and carbon offsets and trading, I think those markets are very well understood. I think what is less well understood by the majority of the finance world is how can you give preferential financing to projects, large projects, could be energy projects, could be agricultural projects, right? Rice accounts for lots of the methane. I think 50% of the methane that is emitted, rice. But so many people eat it. It's how do you take that off the plate? But can you figure out a way to finance projects to encourage producers at the bottom of the pyramid to take steps in their behavior to reduce the amount of emissions that they're creating? So there are a few very interesting companies we're looking at. One uses remote sensors, so satellite monitoring of rice field production. That one's based out of Singapore, but they work a lot in this part of the country, this part of the region. Sorry, we're looking at other potential uses for carbon offsets. So potentially as assets rather than just something that's a tradable commodity. So I think if we can combine some of these innovative approaches that focus more on the positive side with some of the disincentives that are already in place, then perhaps we can approach in a balanced way sustainable finance going forward.
Yeah, I want to give a bit of light to one of the projects in that sense in the room, who is actually helping reduce the burns of the rice fields in Thailand, ecological cycle. So that's one of the examples, right? There is people doing it, it's very new, right? But I think Greg really mentioned it, this is something we need to emphasize. You can do as much EV as you want. If you keep burning 5% of the forest in Thailand every year, you're going to have an issue, right? And 5% is that number today, last year. So I think with the forest that actually happened this year, it's probably going up to 7%. It's massive, right? In 10 years, you don't have much forest anymore, right? So with us, financial people, capitalists, we look at where the subsidies are, we look at the market opportunities are, but there's a little bit of just looking around, right? If you burn 10% of the forest per year, of course something wrong going to happen. And as Greg mentioned, Southeast Asia have the chance to have 80% of the carbon sinks, but also biodiversity, right? That we can leverage later on for carbon credit, etc. So these are assets, right? Now coming back to EV, I think the larger opportunity for the built environment and energy production system are storage. I think Greg mentioned it, and that's a very important one. Unfortunately today, the EV and battery storage space have an issue. It's actually the cost of lithium, nickel, cobalt, because it's a very rare material, extremely limited, and with a monopoly today with China, which gonna just get the price to go to the roof. So in that sense, when you invest in EV right now, as an investor, you also need to think about this. What are today's cost of lithium won't be 2030 cost of lithium, which could actually cancel completely your investment thesis in EV. And I want to really remind investors that sometimes the government subsidies are not as smart as interpreting and calculating things like this. So even though you might want to just throw money at EV right now, it might not be a good investment 5 years from now just because of that lithium access problem, right? So as an investor, you need to be smart, right? You need to think what is inevitable next 5 to 10 years. And sometimes there is market macros like this one, the price of this commodity, lithium or cobalt, that are just making invalid your investment thesis. In that case, I'm coming. we just invested into a company, so let me do a bit of marketing, doing actually EV batteries recycling, right? And so this is a company based in San Francisco, and we're now importing that company in Thailand, and they are recycling EV batteries for Tesla and Mitsubishi, and towards this reconversion, they are leveraging on the material to be able to resell it, because it's very expensive material, lithium, but also they are able to repackage some of the batteries from home energy storage, which I think is the solutions when you have solar or wind. If you can store that energy, then you can use it the whole year, right? Anyway.
No, I just wanted to address Greg's question about whether or not banks actually do finance sustainable or environmentally friendly projects. Just on a macroeconomical level, I think the first green bond was issued in 2007, and as of 2020, I think the statistics says that there's a $500 billion worth of green bonds have been issued. There is a growing trend in Thailand in terms of not of green bonds, but in terms of assessing projects also based on their sustainability. And I think the common approach is that, of course, businesses need to make a profit, and they see that the profitability of a project and their sustainability of a project are two separate and sometimes independent aspects that must be considered separately. In some of the case studies or projects that we worked on, we see that the two concepts intertwine. An example is a aforementioned EV bus project in Bangkok that clearly has a number of other incentives, because banks would also assess that the project proponent has received an approval in principle from a foundation to buy back the carbon credits. So that is something that adds up in terms of financial viability, not only sustainability of the project. The same goes, and of course it's one of the minor factors, but it has although small, it has an impact on the financial viability of a project, is whether this project attracts other types of incentives. So for example, this project might be tax exempt for a number of years. There may be reduction or rebates, or maybe a number of tax benefits, for example, for employment, for cost of electricity. So there are a number of factors that pile up to potentially tip the scales in terms of whether or not project is viable. Of course, there's huge room for improvement. There is still a lot of work to be done. Many banks do not understand the sustainable aspect that is so strongly advocated by the government, by other government agencies in Thailand. But I think I can say that it is a growing trend. So hopefully we will witness more investment in sustainable projects in the near future. I think Thailand is on the right way, in the right path. Again, there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. And I think you've correctly pointed out that the E in the ESG is fairly well understood. And I think what a lot of individuals I know in this space would like to see the S become equally incentivized and equally well understood in many ways. And I think it's not there yet, and hopefully it can become as prominent as the E in evaluating these projects.
Okay, thank you so much, Greg, Luca, and John. It's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of homeworks. But it's mean like we'll be there because of those challenges. All challenges mean opportunity, and that's what I can get from all of you. Thank you so much for this very insightful panels. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the wonderful session. So we will have Mr. Haran De Silva, a Corpstage Australia partner, to give a token of appreciation.
All right, hello everyone. So now for this session, we are privileged to have 3 keynote speakers representing sustainability officers from large companies, the JSW Group, Godrej Group, and Microsoft Asia. Firstly, we'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Praboda Acharya, who will be joining us online. Mr. Acharya is a Group Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW India. JSW Group is a distinguished conglomerate with a market value of 23 billion. Ranking among India's largest corporations, Mr. Acharya brings with him a wealth of experience, spanning over 3 decades in the field of corporate sustainability, environmental management, emissions reductions, climate change, and corporate strategy and policy development. In his current role, he collaborates with CEOs, senior executives, and operations heads to formulate and implement sustainability strategies for the group companies. We are privileged to have Mr. Acharya share his valuable insights and experiences from JSW's sustainable journey. Without further ado, let's delve into the enlightening session and gain valuable knowledge from Mr. Acharya.
In the interest of time, we made a small change in the agenda, like the tea break thing. So please get your caffeine fills from the outside and bring it back to the room. And once we are done with this last panel, the session number 5, we will have a long break till the award ceremony starts. So we'll have a relaxing time after that. Please do feel free to get your caffeine intake from outside. Thank you. And I welcome Mr. Praboda Acharya. Thank you, sir, for being here today. Thank you.
We're just waiting for a few minutes to let everyone get their caffeine, and Mr. Acharya will join us online. As said before, I will reintroduce Mr. Prabodha Acharya. He is the Group Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW India. JSW Group is a distinguished conglomerate with a market value of 23 billion, ranking among India's largest corporations. Mr. Acharya brings with him a wealth of experience, spanning over 3 decades in the field of corporate sustainability, environmental management, emissions reduction, climate change, corporate strategy, and policy development. In his current role, he collaborates with CEOs, senior executives, and operations heads to formulate and implement sustainability strategies in the group companies.
Thank you. Is it over to me now?
Yes, Mr. Acharya.
Oh, thank you very much for a kind, generous introductions. I'm sorry I could not be with you in person. What I'll do in the given time, I'll take you through some of my thoughts. May I now make the presentation so you'll do from your side? Let me share the slide and please confirm if you're able to see it.
Yes, we can see the presentation. Actually, some of them are asking just for 2 minutes. They're coming in.
Okay.
We can see
All
your
right,
presentation. Yeah.
All right, fantastic.
Maybe we would like to see it in the slideshow form. Yeah. Some of the screen is getting cut. So maybe you can zoom setting, full view screen. Fit the screen in there. Fit the screen. Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Yeah. Mr. Prabodha Acharya.
Yeah.
I would just request that we'll just wait for a few minutes because people are just having their tea outside, so should be coming in.
Just, all right.
Just allow us 2 minutes to 3 minutes, Mr. Prabodha. Sincere apologies.
No, it's absolutely fine. Just let me know when to start because I thought you have introduced, so it's up to me now to start. So, Sid, I hope the event is doing fine.
Absolutely.
I missed be there in the persons, but yeah. Thank you for having me.
We are missing you here, sir. We are missing you.
So there is always a next time, Prabodha. So maybe you should be able to make it next time.
Sure, absolutely.
Actually, what happened, we were running about 15-20 minutes late, and then people needed their caffeine shots. So I just told them by the time you enter, they can get the refills inside. So that's where we are little this thing.
I was expecting.
I'm so sorry about this. Okay.
That's okay. No, I was waiting in another link which you had sent. Then I was wondering what's happening. But then I checked your mail.
Yeah, actually, when we created these events link, 3 events links. One is the 9 to 5, then 7 to 10 for the Grit Awards, and then the third one is for the next day tomorrow. The third session tomorrow. We have from 9 to 1 actually tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I saw your agenda.
Yeah. Actually, in this hall here, we have all passionate people. So they have lots of things to say and discuss. And yeah, that's why we've been doing this. Yes, we can start now, I think. Yes. Please, sir.
So, what to me now?
Yeah, I think we can start. We can start now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Once again, good afternoon from Mumbai. I'm really missing not to be with you all. Thank you for having and inviting me, Nisha, to join and give my views. Of course, the session I understand is all about how corporates are handling sustainability, and then I will possibly touch on the journey of JSW Group and how we are taking ahead sustainability. I'm thrilled to understand that you have a lively and passionate discussions and everybody is passionate about sustainability. And that's give me the necessary motivations now to speak for next 10-15 minutes. I just want to see if I am able to change my slide. I think are you presenting the slides from there that side? Because I'm unable to change my slides. Okay,
Yeah.
let me share again. Let me share again.
Okay.
Is it now visible to you?
Yes, but we are seeing, okay, yes, perfect.
I just, okay,
Yeah.
fine, thanks. Sorry for this technical hitch. Well, let me start fast with sustainability because throughout my interaction in my last more than 30 years of professional career, I have not seen two organizations defining sustainability in the same way, neither two persons within the organizations understanding sustainability in the same way. And that always reminds me the childhood Indian story of the five blind people want to see an elephant and they perceive different part to be different part of the elephant. And that is exactly happening in the sustainability field we are seeing. As the time passes, as we see from different organizations' perspective, as we see within the organization different functional perspective, the meaning of sustainability is changing. Some see to manage sustainability is something to manage the risk, and some see this is an opportunity for business. I personally believe sustainability is an business opportunity. Many people equate that with CSRs, philanthropy, operational efficiency improvements. But to me, it looks like, sustainability is 100% of your business. While in some countries you might have mandates for the CSR to share in the profits. So although in this room itself, many people would have different perspective on the sustainability, it is very essential when we talk from the organizational perspective, an organization should define what it looks like. So that is the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make here, when we talk about sustainability, many places we get carried about how we care for Mother Earth. And we talk about whether the earth is going to be sustainable or not. I think in my perspective, it is not about how we are making the earth sustainable. We are worried to make how we make you and me sustainable as a person, as a human being, and how we can make our business sustainable, because that's where our focus is. That is my second point. And to drive that point, I believe where you are sitting, the South Asia, including India and Southeast Asia, is in the epicenter of sustainability purely because if you see the left side of the slide with the small circle, more people in this circle live in the world than people outside. So what does it mean? We have access to less resources, therefore the constraint for us to drive sustainable business or sustainable lifestyle increases. And same thing when I give a comparison, if you see the right side, in the small dot, that's two states of India and Bangladesh, three states of India and Bangladesh. There are more people in that small dot live than combinedly Europe and US. And that is where the challenge. The challenge when you talk about sustainability, we must think about how we can make human beings sustainable and making our business sustainable. Now coming to the business sustainability, that is my third point, which I am borrowing from WBCSD, that from the business perspective, we are looking at three key challenges. Climate emergency, I think, is very well understood now, and anywhere we are discussing about sustainability, even in my experience, 90 to 95% of time, we are discussing about the climate change mitigation and adaptations. We are not, I mean, we are so focused, and obviously that is the single biggest challenge for business and for the human being. The second part is the nature. You all know how as a business and as a human race, we are so dependent on nature. Please understand, nature is not dependent on us. Nature can make them self-sustainable, and Mother Earth is going to continue whether the human beings are there or not. So therefore, we need to be very careful on how we interact with the nature and use that for our benefit. The third aspect is growing inequality in the society and also the business. If we don't address those, possibly we will not be able to build a sustainable business practice, or we will not have a quality life for the human being to survive. That is the third point I want to make. With that, now we know how the global risk landscape is changing. I'm sure many of you must be following World Economic Forum's risk perception report, which is coming from more than 1 decade. And this year they have given what are the possible risks in the short term up to 2025 and in the medium term up to 2030. And you would have seen that majority of the risk which the business has identified are those related to the environmental sustainability. So therefore, it's very important to look at those and see how it impacts. Now, how we can create and build a resilient business practice, that's what I always say, that if we want to build a business, sustainable business practices, we have to deal with what people we have, what are the assets we are putting, and what are the process we are doing. And in the process of making the product and services, how do we manage the associated impacts? And that should be within the planetary boundary for us to survive, for the business to survive, and obviously to contribute to the quality life of human being. Now with that, basic presumptions what I wanted to project, let me now take you through what we are doing at JSW. The first point I said that sustainability has a different meaning for different people, different organizations, and different functions of the organization. That is the reason it is very essential to define what sustainability means for us. So JSW being a conglomerate having different business practices, right, making from steel to cement to paint to infrastructure to generating energy, it was very essential. We all must understand in the same way what sustainability means. That is where we have brought out the vision statement, and this vision statement very much defines sustainability for us. It is based on 3 key responsibility of business, what we are telling, that we will be conducting our business in an environmentally, in an ethically, in a socially responsible way. We should be able to run our business in a manner that we leave enough resource for our next generation to meet their need. When we say to next generation to meet their need, we make a fundamental assumptions that the human rights issue, human rights of current generation and the future generation remains the same. We know that the need of the future generation could be completely different, but that's our assumptions. The third thing we have stated that we should be able to demonstrate that how we are meeting our sustainability vision. And to address that, we have placed a very robust governance system, starting from the board level sustainability committee to the review of progress by the executive committee on a monthly basis. While they review the business performance, they also review the sustainability performance in the same weightage. And then we have independent working group within our operations to ensure that the key performance indicator or the KRA, key result areas that we have identified to able to demonstrate our sustainability vision are being monitored, are being reported. We do report all our performance in the integrated annual reports. Now, when we made a sustainability vision and defined what sustainability means, it is very much essential that we should have a structure to support achieving the vision. And that structure we call this framework. And that is based on these left side you see the 7 areas of key strategy elements. But what we have done, we did a materiality analysis and engaged with the stakeholder and identified these 17 key focus areas. We call it focus areas. They are not 17 SDGs. They are related to SDG, but they are not SDG. And these 17 areas, what we have, are supported with policy statement, which is basically we are committing what we want to achieve in each of those focus areas. Once we have made that commitment in our policy statement, which is publicly available, we are working on developing management standard, technical standards, and guidance note to support our business to able to demonstrate the policy commitments. And while developing this architecture, we have ensured that we take account of existing national and international standards and practices. That's what we have done. So having done a vision, we have developed a strategy supported by a framework to ensure that we continuously deliver the promise what we have made to our stakeholders. And that is what we have done in the materiality assessment and identified the stakeholder priorities. This is the process of what we have done. So what I stated here. Now, below that, we have given specific targets of the each areas, and I have shown this in the ESG. So basically, our objective is no harm to environment, no harm to people, no harm to society. So that is what our fundamental premises, and these are some of the key areas which I have projected here. Now, let me show you how we are progressing those across our organizations. And that is where I wanted to say here, JSW, we are mostly into manufacturing, and that too so-called hard to abate sector in the climate change parlance. So therefore, it is very much essential for us how we look at the future technology developments that will enable our commitment to mitigate the climate change impacts. And that is where one of the breakthrough technology which we are implementing, the carbon capture utilization project. At the moment, we are looking at to understand how it behaves so that we can scale up when it becomes financially feasible. At the same time, we are also trying to learn from others and have made various tie-ups with the leading bodies. The other important lever is going to be for us is utilizing the green hydrogen. And that is where we became a founding member for the India Hydrogen Alliance. And we are trying to put up a green hydrogen project. Hopefully that will come soon. We have already publicly declared, and that will be used to produce so-called the low carbon steel or green steel. So the scoping and pilots are being worked out. So this is where we are looking at future technologies to be an enabler to decarbonize our operations. The other point which is well understood as a lever to decarbonize is the energy transition. Energy transition is very much essential and it is commercially viable now. And that is where our objective is that by 2030, our aim is not to use any thermal coal to produce electrical energy for the use within our group companies. And we have already in the process to complete around 1000 megawatt of renewable installation to feed into steel making process. The 225 megawatt of solar plant have already started feeding to our steel operations. But our requirement, what we have estimated by 2030, we will be installing around 6.5 gigawatt of renewable energy only to cater to our group needs. So that's, I think, is a very bold statement we have taken and we are working towards. And this is something we have started getting results. If you remember in the initial, I started with 3 imperative: climate, another nature. In the nature interactions, when we talk, 2 things come to our mind very prominently. One is that biodiversity, and we know the rate of species loss is alarming. And biodiversity loss is something which is now gone beyond the planetary boundary. And it is very much essential from a business perspective to ensure that we take care of the nature and preserve the biodiversity. We have taken a very ambitious task to demonstrate no net loss of biodiversity by 2030. And that is where now we are studying what and making the biodiversity management plan. One of the key initiatives that I want to highlight here is the mangrove preservations, where it is not only giving a good result in terms of climate change adaptation, but it has a lot of associated social benefit because it helps in improving the fertility of the agricultural land. It's improved the quality of piscicultures. It improves the quality of life of the people. And this is completely a project we are doing by taking the society into confidence, and they are the people who are driving this. We are trying to scale it up and looking towards blue carbon is one of the important levers in our decarbonization journey. Now let me come to the another important aspect when we talk about sustainability. We cannot really isolate circularity or circular economy from any sustainability strategy you make or we make. And that's becoming very important. If anybody have visited any iron and steel operations, you would have seen, I call it as an excellent example of how circularity is inbuilt when you build the integrated steel operations. Nothing which is coming inside the plant goes out without having a value. And here I want to give a good example how a business is created within the group supporting circularity. We are into steel making, and when we make iron and steel, there are a lot of waste product comes as a slag. Earlier, even when I started my career, I used to see huge hillocks of slags when you pass through any integrated steel operations. And that's where we created another business, JSW Cement, which takes these slags and convert that to make a low carbon cement. And in fact, JSW Cement has the lowest carbon footprint among all the cements manufacturer in the world. That's only possible because we are using slag and not using more clinkers. There are a lot of examples. There are videos available in our website. I would encourage you to see how we are converting those waste into the useful sand, and that is replacing the natural sand which is coming from the river and degrading the environmental conditions. The other issue which is most important is becoming the plastic waste. Although we are not a generator of much of the plastic waste, what we are doing, we are collecting those plastic waste and started using those in our steel operations. That helps not only in reductions of carbon emissions by avoiding the equivalent amount of coal, but it also take care of the plastic nuisance. So these are some of the examples, and our commitment is to ensure that 100% of resource which comes inside our operations has to be completely value-added product out when it goes out. That means nothing, not a single thing become a waste. That's the importance of embracing circularity which we are doing. The last part where I want to impress on is that nowadays customers and consumers are very much aware to use greener products. So in the sense, there are a lot of demand coming for to distinguish your product as a greener product. And that's where, as a first step, we thought to communicate what is my environmental impact of the product. That is where we have done environmental product declarations for all our products. Second thing what we are doing, we are trying to certify them as a Green Pro, which is a Indian regulations have standards. And if you meet the standard, they are called greener product. And that's where we are going for those kind of certifications for those products. The third thing is that by producing high strength materials, as you might be knowing that steel is everywhere and it is needed by everybody. But if we provide more quality and high strength steel, the quantum of consumption will reduce. And that is something called material, you improve the material efficiency and thereby you reduce the carbon emissions where we are focusing. So with that, let me stop here and thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. These are the recognitions what we are getting. I don't want to go through. And you might be knowing that JSW become a CDP A-lister and one of the 3 steel companies has achieved that. So thank you very much. And I always say the last thing which I very much like what our father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi has stated that be the change you want to see in the world. So start this movement and I believe and I appeal to all the audience, you are the change agent and be the change agent in your organization wherever you are working, the society where you are working, and we have a responsibility towards our next generations to demonstrate and hand them a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I lost you.
Oh, sir, we have a question for you.
Yes,
can you hear? Yeah.
Mr. Acharya, this is Sandeep Kohli. Can you hear me?
I could hear you well loud and clear, Sandeep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your very nice talk and about talking about circularity and the initiatives that JSW is engaging in. You brought out one of the good things which JSW is talking about, which is using steel slag to make cement. Just out of curiosity, we want to understand whether is it only in, is it that all steel mills can use slag for making cement? And if so, would this be used, would this, make, how much percentage of the world demand can be covered up through these kind of circularity initiatives for cement?
Let me answer the first question first. In a steel making process, the first process is something called iron making. And then it got refined to steel making. When I call steel making slag, it is basically technically known as iron slags. And that can be completely used for cement making. 100% steel slags, let us call those steel slags, they can be used for cement making. We are using 100% of the slag. What it does, it replaces...
Recording stopped.
It replaces the need of using the clinker. And in the cement making, when the clinkerization process, when calcium carbonate get converted to calcium oxide, you get CO2 emission. So avoid those emissions by using the steel slag. That's the first question. That means all slags can be converted into cement. Second part, if all the steel slags can get converted to the cement making, what is the need of, how much traditional cement it can replace? I don't have that statistics right now, but I'm sure as economies are growing, the demand for steel and cements are also growing. So therefore, we must always, I know this is specifically Indian cement sector is pioneer in that, and they are using all kind of alternative, including steel slags and fly ashes. So a significant portion of the conventional cement can be replaced if you use all kind of waste in the cement making process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acharya, for the keynote speech. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening ahead.
Thank you. So,
shall I log out now?
Yes, so next on our agenda is our second keynote speaker, Mr. Ram Vaidyanathan. He is the Head of Environmental Sustainability at Godrej Group India, with a remarkable 15 years of experience in the fields of environment, energy, and water management. Yeah, please welcome on stage.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nisha and the Copstage team, for inviting me to this lovely event. I've already networked with so many brilliant people. It's been a fantastic time so far. I'm sure it'll only get better today evening and the sessions tomorrow. Prabodha is a good friend of mine. It was great listening to him, and always very difficult act to follow because his presentation is always so full of knowledge. But I'm going to try and take a stab at this. Let's make sure the technology works. Great. The title is a bit misleading, to be honest, because although it talks about how far have we come, I'm going to spend more of my time talking about where we need to go, because how far we've come, that's information available in the public domain. That only helps set the context. But I prefer to spend my time on where the challenges really lie. And for an August audience like this, I think that's more relevant because I'm really looking to you guys to help me with the solutions. So just to give you a brief overview, the regulatory and disclosure landscape in India has evolved significantly over the last decade or so. It started with more focus on business responsibility, on corporate social responsibility, and it's eventually evolved now to something called the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, or BRSR. A lot of people have alluded to it already in the previous sessions. What essentially it mandates is a much deeper quantitative and qualitative description of a company's activities along 9 different principles, which includes all the parameters of E, S, and G. The really interesting aspect of it is A, the breadth. They're covering more companies year on year. Now it's become the top 1,000 listed companies. But what is more interesting is that starting next year, all the information on this has to be assured by a third party. So it's time to stop making pronouncements and to really back it up with data. And that's, I think, a really positive move. Again, like I said, our sustainability journey, all this information, if you guys are really interested in reading about it, is available on our website. But just a few highlights. I mean, while this group was founded over a century ago, in 1897, it's already had a rich history of philanthropy and environmental protection. But the formal sustainability journey began in 2011 with the setting up of what is known in Godrej as the Good and Green vision and the Good and Green team. So the good obviously speaks about the social impact, the green speaks about the environmental impact. The first step was to actually measure where we were. And for that, we actually set up a sustainability platform, which we logged in our data and we started measuring our energy, water, waste consumption to begin with. Once we set the baseline, it was time to set targets. And we, being a conglomerate, I don't know many of you know about Godrej industry, but we're in multiple businesses. The largest of which is a consumer products business, which is global. We have operations in India, Indonesia, South America, many countries in Africa. So setting targets was, granular targets came later. The first step was as a group, as a philosophy, where do you want to be? So the idea of carbon neutrality, water positivity, ensuring zero waste to landfill from all our facilities, employability from a social perspective, upskilling of larger communities. These were some of the guiding principles that formed the core of our strategy. In the first 10 years, I would say we were 80% successful, not 100%, but we learned a lot. And one of the lessons was not setting 10-year targets. It's about taking 5-year targets, because the regulatory and technology ecosystem is evolving at such a rapid rate. It doesn't make sense to set targets that are so far away that you have to constantly keep changing it while you're achieving them. Which is why I find, the net zero nation targets of 2050 and 2070 quite laughable, because I can barely see what's going to happen 3 years from now. And how are we putting targets for 2070 and how are we going to measure it? Because the world would have changed completely by then. But one of the key things that we really did was we paired our net zero carbon neutrality target with the science-based targets for absolute decarbonization. So all the Godrej Group companies have committed to the SBTi, and we are setting our targets for absolute decarbonization without offsets by the year 2035. All of them will be achieving this. We also became water positive. So we are at, I think, 4.5 times water positive, and I'll speak about that when we get to the part on watersheds. But what's really interesting is that you would think that by being water positive, you've solved the problem. But when we continue to do a climate risk assessment, we found that water stress was one of the biggest risks for our operations. Because while we were doing watershed programs in communities where water was a big problem, we weren't physically present there. So we had this really weird paradox of being water positive, but still rating water as very high risk. And so that has actually fueled our next set of targets, which I mentioned in the last part in FY22. We've revised our program, our targets. One of the other interesting things that we've done, and this, I can't claim any credit for this because this is historically the Godrej family's contribution to, I would say, to India and to the planet, is that 23% of the shares of the group are kept in a trust, which is only to be used for environmental and social purposes. This includes owning and caring for the largest privately managed mangroves in Mumbai. Just to give you an idea, this is about 800 hectares in size. It holds about 600,000 tons of carbon dioxide, and it sequesters 60,000 tons of carbon dioxide annually. It's a barrier, natural barrier to the floods, which is a major climate risk in Mumbai. It's also an amazing place for biodiversity preservation. And the best part is it's open to the public. I mean, you can schedule visits, and you can take a boat and ride out in the center, and you can actually do biodiversity walks in this place. You can find out more about this online. There's an entire website about this. Yeah, so like I said, each of these are successes. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to talk about what the next step is in this. So on renewable energy, we've been fairly lucky because our thermal energy requirement is much higher than our electrical energy. It's by a 70 to 30 sort of a ratio. And we were able to replace 99% of our thermal energy requirement from fossil fuel to agri-waste biomass. Somebody in the earlier session was speaking about the potential of agricultural waste as biomass. Well, we actually harness that quite significantly. In fact, one of our business's subunits is an oil palm plantation in India, which is an entirely circular business. What I mean by that is, once the palm fruit is taken out, the oil is extracted, the kernel is actually converted back into briquettes and biomass and used in the boilers for cogeneration, which fulfills 99.9% of the plant's electrical and thermal energy needs. So, and the ash from the biomass is then given to farmers after enrichment to use as fertilizer. So it's almost an example of a perfectly circular business, and that's actually led to a lot of other projects which we've taken inspiration from this from. But people keep asking me, why only 65, why not more? And we'll be at 70% by 26. But I could not possibly tell you when we can get to 100% because there are two factors that prevent me from committing to that. One is regulatory, and I'm glad we had a session on the importance of regulation and policy because regulation is still very slow in terms of really pushing for renewable energy. We still have a lot of, I would say there's a disconnect between national and state level regulations, and that leads to a lot of restrictions on the amount of renewable energy you can put. The other is obviously technological, because storage, we haven't really explored on a commercial perspective yet. But in this year, we are doing our first energy storage pilot. If that is successful, then of course, we are looking at much higher numbers. But 70% by 26 is, we already have the commitment, we have the pipeline already built for that. I already mentioned we're going to be scope 1 and 2 net zero by 2035. Scope 3 is a very interesting aspect. So 85% of our scope 3 emissions comes from raw material extraction. And while we are inventorizing and publicly reporting on it year on year, what I don't really have a good answer to is how you plan to reduce your scope 3 emissions. And the answer to that lies in technology and data. But it also lies in using a little bit of common sense. So, okay, so let me look at the data and the technology part of it. One of our businesses, consumer products, has about 8,000 raw materials just sourced from about 250 suppliers. If you multiply the two, That's the number of data points I'm going to have to refresh on an annual basis to arrive at a scope 3 reduction for my raw material emissions. Now, can that be done? Of course. There's no limits to what can be done with technology, but it also requires a lot of acceptance from your supply chain. It requires a lot of investment. But the really interesting question that I want to put to this group is, should it be done? Are we missing the trees for the woods when we speak about scope 3 emissions? Would it not make practical sense to solve the problem quickly, to have your suppliers graded based on their environmental performance and commit to using a larger proportion of A-grade suppliers by a certain year? Would that not be a more practical way of solving this problem than mandate that every single supplier in your supply chain has to provide you emissions data on every single day on material on an annual basis? So somewhere I feel in the discussion on scope 3 we're missing the practical solution for a very technological, very decimal point solution. So that's a point for everyone to think about. So maybe we can discuss questions afterwards. Sorry? Oh, you want me to repeat it again? The scope 3, I would say the big paradox is, should we actually be measuring scope 3 emissions to the decimal value? Does it really make sense? Because there are too many data points, too many suppliers, and this data has to be validated and published on an annual basis for you to report any reductions in scope 3. Instead, the CDP approach, which is basically telling everybody to report on their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions and their other climate risks, assigning them a grade based on that, which then allows GCPL to say, okay, by 2035, 100% of my suppliers will be A- or above. So I don't need to know the exact number from them, but I'm getting somebody else to verify that these guys are good performance on emissions. So I think that would be a more practical way to go about this. But that's a question for us to discuss later. Yes, we have reduced our emissions intensity, but that goes along with our renewable energy reduction or increase. I really want to spend a bit of time speaking about our watershed program, because the more we delve into our watershed program, the more we realize it has solved many more problems than what we started off with. We basically chose 4 states in India and 4 regions in those that were extremely arid and very water stressed. And in conjunction with the National Agricultural Bank, the NABARD in India, they co-funded this watershed program, which was, they matched whatever we were funding. So we did this brilliant program, which I think covers about 9,400 hectares, and it will reach up to 12,000 hectares at its peak. The numbers, I have a vague idea, but I have the exact numbers. But in the last year, across all of our watersheds, we sequestered about 32 million kiloliters of water. We're also now realizing that because of the higher water availability, we're able to sequester carbon in these areas. So we've registered these on the VCS registry as well, with no plans of selling them because they contribute towards our net zero target. But the whole point of getting it assured in a VCS is to make sure the numbers are exact and not just a claim that we're making. It has also led to a tremendous increase in the livelihood of farmers, which has gone up by 3x, because their availability of water means they're able to have 3 cropping cycles instead of 1. They can grow cash crops, and they're getting a much higher revenue from their agricultural land. So I would say the watershed has been one of our flagship star performers. The one bit of it, which we haven't really cracked, is biodiversity. We know it improves biodiversity, but we don't know how much it does. And I'll get to the biodiversity point when I speak about the future challenges that we face. On waste management, we're about 90% of the way there to 100%. It's really funny. The reason we're not from 90 to 100 yet is because the additional 10% increase has happened because of the increased amount of biomass we're using, and we have more ash from the boilers, which are finding ways to re-enrich and give to people who can use it. Currently, the 2 biggest users of our biomass ash are construction companies who use it as a filler material for buildings, and of course, farmers who can reutilize it as filler for the soil as part of their fertilizers. But what we're really finding difficult is for many locations, the logistics of it are more expensive than the actual material. And so we're trying to solve that problem by identifying partners who can handle this for us. But again, done quite a bit, need to do a lot more. We've also taken on a lot of urban waste management projects. We've picked about 6 municipalities in India, and we looked at it from a very holistic, entire value chain approach. It wasn't just about the quantity of waste, it was about changing people's behavior as well. Because ultimately, we all know that the problem with the waste isn't the waste itself. Just like I say, the problem of plastics is not the plastic itself, it's that there are leakages in the value chain. So how do you make sure, if you can make sure that you segregate waste efficiently, you will solve 90% of your plastics problem. The real issue is that segregation does not happen at source. Low value plastics end up in the landfill, they never get picked up, and that cycle just repeats. So we have managed to do, in these municipalities, self-sustaining models of waste segregation. The plastic goes towards recycling, the organic waste goes towards mulching or creating biogas, and the really costly materials are picked up by scrap dealers. So we've done about 13,000 tons of waste we've diverted from landfill. We hope to do more. We're taking on another 9 municipalities in the next 3 years. So this should be quite an interesting study. We also did a very interesting study for those of you in the property sector. We did a very interesting study with the university on the fate of construction waste. We were reporting all construction waste as landfill, which when intuitively we know it's not true. So we did an actual study, and the report is there on the Godrej Properties website. I would urge you all to go see it. It's a very beautiful report. It tells you specifically what kind of waste is recycled and how it's recycled and how much of it is done. So that was a very interesting study, and that's going to really form the basis of our strategy for construction waste going forward. Now we come to the real complicated stuff, the supply chain. This is where we're not in our comfort zone, because your operations you're in control of, your suppliers not so much. Convincing them to share data is the single biggest problem. Those of you who work in palm oil will know exactly what I'm talking about. Traceability is a massive issue, because you buy from traders who buy from traders who buy from traders who buy from middlemen. So how do you get to data on traceability? I was very interested in the gentleman who spoke about blockchain, because I really think technology here could be a perfect way to ensure end-to-end traceability if you can have a actual digital tag to every single material you buy. But that's a little further away. For now, we have a sustainable supply chain policy. We have an annual assessment. But this assessment is not really punitive or incentive driven. It's just suggestions. All we do is we tell our suppliers, here are the best practices. The reason for that is the ecosystem isn't evolved enough yet for us to either incentivize or to penalize suppliers for not following certain environmental best practices. Because today in India, the market is so competitive. If I refuse to buy from a supplier saying, you haven't installed X amount of renewable energy, he'll just turn around and sell to someone else. So that is a practical reality with which we are dealing with. But this is something that we are looking to work on with the help of our partners as well as through technology. On the circularity and shared value approach, I think the one thing that I want to really focus on there is the product lens approach. For the first 10 years, we focused on the process. How do we improve energy use in our process? How do we improve water use in our process? How do we improve renewables in our process? How do we reduce the waste from process? Now we're looking at the entire product from a life cycle approach. So we've completed the life cycle assessment for about 60% of our overall portfolio across all the 4 companies. We plan to increase that to about 80% by 25 with the aim of eventually being 100%. But the LCA is not the end goal. The life cycle assessment is not the end goal. It is merely the starting point. Because that has two I would say, prongs that emerge from that. The first of it is, of course, you get a baseline for your product and you say, okay, I'm going to make this product greener because I know for this entire product life cycle, here are the hotspots. Here is where it really makes an impact. A very interesting outcome that came out of this was, I don't know how many of you have seen the plug-in mosquito repellent devices, the ones that you get in India, which you plug it in and it has a vaporizer fit to it. When we were manufacturing it, we always thought the biggest impact there was, or the actual manufacturing part of it, because it has an electric component, it has a plastic component. Compared to the rest of our products, which are fairly straightforward, this is a little more complicated. When we did the life cycle assessment, we found that the biggest emission in that entire product comes from the use phase, so when it's plugged in. So that has given us ideas about what we do in the next 10 years. It may not be possible to create a solar-operated or a battery-operated device right now, but this is something that gave us an idea of what we can work towards. So that's one positive of the LCA, the product lens approach. The other positive is, if you do enough LCAs, you will eventually get to refine your new product development framework with certain boundaries. So these are no-go areas. These materials should not be used. These processes should not be used. You must source from these places. So it gives you a boundary for your new product development. And that's the biggest boon. I'm just going to spend a minute talking about, this is the next big challenge for us. Our three biggest material areas of effort are plastics, which in India, to be honest, has been taken care of by the most stringent regulations in the world. If you haven't seen India's EPR regulations, please go have a look at it. It is extremely stringent. It is extremely ambitious, so much so that by 2026, 30% of all rigid plastics have to have recycled, 30% of the overall plastic has to be from recycled material in the next 2 years. Just to give you an idea, it's at 1% right now. So we have a huge mountain to climb. The second is, of course, water stress, and I've already spoken about what we're doing on that. But this is somewhere where we are completely green. We're just starting to understand and get our head around biodiversity. The importance of this has been mentioned by many people. I'm going to spend time on that. But three really, really critical things. Understanding the metrics around biodiversity. How do you measure biodiversity? Carbon is easy to measure. Water is easy to measure. Waste is easy to measure. Biodiversity, not so much. Very difficult to put quantitative metrics around it. So that gives rise to the second. You can't have a single biodiversity plan. It has to be very, very customized based on your location, based on the geography. Even, I was just talking to someone earlier, 2 coastal towns may not have the same biodiversity impact at all. Because the pattern of rainfall, sunshine, soil quality, everything may be different. So it's very important to come up with very, very specific biodiversity plans for locations in which you operate and have a baseline for those put up. And of course, sir, everyone knows this. Once this is done, you have to set quantifiable targets. I like what Prabhuda mentioned about they use secondary indicators like land cover and water availability to highlight the health of biodiversity. But the best way, I think, and this is somewhere where, again, I don't know how much science is involved, but it would be to use microorganism content to judge the actual health of an ecosystem. I just want to spend 30 seconds talking about 2 wonderful products that we developed. One is a powder to liquid hand wash. The other is a gel to liquid body wash. So this basically came up for 2 reasons. One, from an environmental impact perspective, this uses 50% less plastic than the hand wash refill. That uses 84% less plastic than the body wash refill. So you've reduced plastic, you can pack more units in a truck, so you've reduced your scope 3 emissions, you reduce diesel usage, and this happens to be the cheapest hand wash in the world. So we've actually democratized hand washing. So that's a really, I mean, it ticks the S box as well. More information, again, like I said, on our website. Just one final message. A lot of people always assume we know all the answers and we are sure of everything when we start, but nobody's sure. We're never sure when we start off. There are always doubts. There are always risks. But never let perfect be the enemy of good. Doing 80% of what you need to do does not cost much, doesn't take a lot of resources, doesn't take a lot of manpower. So get to the 80%, worry about the 20% later, but make a start. So that's my final message. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Please stay here. Oh, yeah. If I can get Mr. Ashad Paddy to give the token of appreciation. Now it's time to introduce our third and final speaker before the Grid Awards this evening. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Zia Zaman, General Manager Asia, Corporate Business Development Microsoft, and board member of the National Environment Agency. Mr. Zaman brings with him a wealth of experience, having worked at some of the forefront companies in the industry, including Singtel, LG Electronics North America, Gartner, MetLife Asia, and Lumen Lab. His expertise in corporate business and development and his diverse background have positioned him as a thought leader in the field.
Everybody, I know it's late. I'm the last presenter, and I'm not sure you want to hear about yet another set of commitments from yet another large company. So we have three choices. So put up your hand, you want to hear about some commitments that we're making at Microsoft. There are some, great. Put up your hand if you want to hear about the investments that we're making in our Climate Innovation Fund. Okay, great. And put up your hand if you want to hear some stories about the Singapore government's commitments to energy. Ooh, some good ones there. Okay, I have an idea. Let's get some energy in the room. Everyone stand up for a second. Just stand up. Stretch, take a minute. I wish we had the temperature a little bit higher. That way we would save a little energy. But as we get started, I want to just also plug that my colleague Ricky back there created all the images in this presentation using AI. And if you want to know the prompts, we'll be happy to share them with you. But this is our sustainability story, a little story about our investments, and maybe some personal stories about my time at the EMA. So this is a logo slide of some of the things that I've done. This is about who I am. And I'm currently on the National Environmental Agency's board. And for the last 6 years, I was also on the board of the Energy Market Authority. And we helped set the energy policy for Singapore. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that later on today. You can see a variety of other things that I've done. And if you're wondering, yes, I am Canadian. So Microsoft, our sustainability story. We really believe that we understand what our customers and our partners have to do in terms of balancing the need for growth and then balancing the need for sustainability. And it isn't something that we think that is going to be easy, but we believe as a technology provider, we might be able to help you get there. So I love it. You guys are standing for much longer than I thought you would be. That's great. Stay standing. Our future, our responsibility. Look, this is a set of commitments that we are going to make, and I'm going to share with you going forward. And part of why I think it's important to recognize that these commitments are important is because we can't continue to do things the same way we've been doing them in the past. We really believe that's going to take a bold ambition and visionary solutions. Some of the incremental thinking here that's in the space, as we know, is probably not going to cut it, which is why I'm super excited to hear from the last two speakers. Congratulations. I was just saying I want to buy some of this powder in Singapore because of the plastic footprint. And the other things that we've done around steel. And yet there's so much more bold thinking that's required than perhaps what we've seen to date. And so look, to reduce emissions dramatically, we have to not just think about carbon credits, we have to think about ways in which we could abate everything that we have done. And one of the commitments that we made isn't just a 2030 commitment to be net zero, but it's a 2050 commitment to reverse every single bit of carbon that we've ever emitted since the beginning of our history in 1975. Now, partly you could say that's yet another long-range commitment, how are you going to get there? But I thought it sent a signal that perhaps other companies should be thinking the same way about how do they reduce their impact over time. And I won't get into the details in the interest of time. Here is the sustainability story that we have had. It all started with the first goal, which was in 2009. And you can read the number of things that we did, but 2020 is when we made a big stand and said, here are the number of things that we were going to do. And you'll see some of them going forward, but in 2020, those approaches led to a 2021 and a 2022 sustainability report, which the 21 won one of the awards for the best sustainability report in the world. It is hard for a $2.2 trillion market cap company to report back. But once we made that commitment in 2020, we had to be our first customer. And you can see where we're going with regards to waste, carbon, water. Biodiversity, as you said, is hard to measure, but it's something that we're committed to as well. Carbon negative by 2030, water positive by 2030, zero waste by 2030, and protect more land than we use. And to top it all off, we want to build a planetary computer. The first time I saw that word, I thought, what could that be? It is indeed what you think it might be. And it is, you can look it up on the website, but it's a computer to measure the ongoing, we call it a digital twin, if you will, of everything that's happening on the planet so that we can all feed in to a system that we can use to track.
I won't get into the details. You've seen commitments. You can read about them, but these are very aggressive and ones that we really believe in. I'm relatively new to Microsoft. I've only been here for 2 years, but I did join in 2008 and quickly left because I didn't really like the culture. But when I came back, one of the things that I really liked was the fact that internally, our commitment to ESG exceeds what we're saying externally. So here I am on this stage trying to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing because we fundamentally believe it. We grade ourselves. We give ourselves rewards on the basis of how we're doing, not just on the E, but also on the S. And I think it's an important part of where Microsoft is today. Put up your hand if you know which CEO probably brought all of this in our company. Indeed, Satya made a fundamental shift. Satya Nadella made a fundamental shift in the way in which our culture operates around ESG. So our journey starts with things like smart building solutions. It's incredibly important because some of the services that you're using today, as you check your email or check on Teams or WhatsApp, use data centers, and those data centers need to be more sustainable. And there's so much work that we need to do and so much work that we have done. And I will talk a little bit about Scope 3, but I do agree that we also use a grading system of ABC as well as tracking in order to be able to figure out which suppliers to use. We've optimized our data centers. We've tried to improve devices and packaging. I'm a gamer, so the Xbox is getting less and less packaging. Reduce the impact of our supply chain, and maybe the most important thing is shifting the culture of the organization. If it doesn't appeal to you, you're probably not in the right place. Thinking through carbon, waste, water, biodiversity. It's such an important part of who we are today, and it's a part of the culture of what we're trying to transmit to our partners. I love this slide, not just because there's a Canadian grizzly here, but it just says everything in terms of what our progress is. Read the sustainability report if you're a CISO. If you're interested, you could just look at this. We have done a lot around carbon, and yet our Scope 1 and 2, it remained proportional with business growth in FY22. What does that mean? It grew, but it grew at the rate of which our business grew. And so it's not getting any stronger. We've worked on environmental justice. We've worked on sustainability skills gap. I'm going to talk about the innovations. We reduced our single-use plastic, and we tried our best in an area that we can. It's a hyper-local in the Pacific Northwest and Canadian areas to help protect acres in both Canada and in Belize and the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot here, but I encourage you to go look at the report because it tells us a little bit more about what we are doing. The bottom green layer is the data. Now, many of you CSOs and are not as technology savvy, but you made allusions to the fact that we need better models to understand the data. We need better data governance, and we need a reliable data foundation. We have been our first and best customer. To create a report that's as detailed as the one that we produce, we need to track everything, and so we eat our own dog food. We use our own systems, our own cloud for sustainability to account. The first time I went to one of these events, there was a guy named Ryan Lim, for the friends who may know Ryan in the Singapore context. And he said, see, how do I explain this simply? I said, I have an ABC rule. He said, what do you mean ABC? I said, A is about accounting. C is about compliance. Those are good reasons to do sustainability. But the B is about the business. And it's akin to the skills conversation that we had earlier about how we are moving up in terms of the skills required to be a leader. But the B is super hard because what it really is about transforming business. Because it's great to be a great accountant of what we need to do and the systems that underlie it. It's important to be compliant with regulations because that's the only way we're really going to move the industry. But B is about fundamentally transforming our businesses to make it happen. This is a virtuous cycle. It looks like 4 boxes on a slide. I don't think Ricky used the image creator to create this image, but think about it as if you are really good at operational excellence, as we heard from some of the last 2 speakers. It feeds your ESG commitments, it gives you growth opportunities, it provides shareholder and stakeholder value. Or you start with the commitment and you will find growth opportunities and the shareholders will applaud and that will lead to operational excellence. Underlying all of this is you will attract great talent. You will attract better suppliers, and you will attract perhaps even better financing, and the customers that you have, and even the shareholders that you have, will be attracted to your cycle, virtuous cycle. But it is not easy to get started, and I appreciate that. In the interest of time, I won't get too deeper.
Sustainability accelerates transformation. One of my pet peeves is that asking these large companies to make the transition is going to require risk. Yes, it will require data and models and things that we can provide at Microsoft, but the risk to the transition risk has a cost to it. And yet, if you talk to friends of mine at Munich Re or Swiss Re, they would happily take that risk from you as companies, pool it, and figure out ways in order to be able to price it better. We could use carbon taxes and appropriate pricing to basically change the way we think about it. But until we do that, the transformation in the industries will not occur. But to accelerate this transformation, we need to start from a place of sustainability and thinking through what it's going to take. But I'm a big believer that there are other things that need to be unlocked in order for this to happen. I know we just went through a heat wave, and Ministry for the Future always comes up in one of these events. But if you reread those first 50 pages, it really does sound like what's happening today in Iran, in India, in Pakistan, and maybe in the future in Thailand. If you haven't read it, please read it. And it really tells the story about the transformation that is required. And they do mention Swiss Re. So to help record, report, and reduce the impact of organizations, we're working with partners. So it isn't just one company. All of our partners, from suppliers all the way through to ecosystem partners, software companies, are helping us do this. And we're building new capabilities across ESG. So we don't just focus on carbon, although it's incredibly important. So why is this important for Asia? This is my favorite generated slide. Economic growth is happening mostly in Asia. If you look out to 2050 and think about GDP growth around the world, sector by sector, and you add it up, over 70% of the growth is coming from right here in Asia. You start to wonder why companies don't have their headquarters in Asia more, because it's where all the growth is. In the insurance industry, anyone want to guess a number about where the growth is coming from? How much of a percentage of the growth is coming from Asia plus all out Africa? 93% of all the growth is coming in insurance, a $2 trillion industry, from Asia. Number two, Scope 3 emissions. I'm going to get to this. More than 50% of our Scope 3 emissions at Microsoft emanate from Asia. Our products and services are used and consumed worldwide. We're an American company, and yet we operate in hundreds of countries, but Asia is the root cause of our Scope 3 emissions, and we got to try to figure out ways to fix that. And where are we going to have more impact than here? Of course, the most populous continent on the planet. If we're going to have impact, if we're going to make a difference when it comes to inclusive, sustainable products and services, it has to be here. And yet, Microsoft tends to think, or used to tend to think, of Asia as an afterthought. But not anymore. We invest in climate tech. We have been for a few years. We have a fund which is called the Climate Innovation Fund. It is not the only fund that we have that is focused on this, but it is the most sizable and it is the most meaningful. Our commitment was to invest $1 billion over 4 years, and we're about halfway through. But what's really important is, what are we looking at? And why are we looking at it? And what deals can you bring to me, Mike, and Ricky in the back of the room over the course of the next year? And why am I up on stage making this plea to you? We want to speed the development of sustainable technologies and solutions. And it's not really about grants. It's really about classic venture philanthropy, venture investing. So what are we looking for? This is the one slide. It's confidential, so please, if you do want to use it or ask me about it, be sensitive to that. We invest in two things. We invest in new technologies, and we also invest in ways in which we could accelerate the things that we already have. Makes a lot of sense. Power purchase agreements for things that we can already do, as well as innovating in new technology. That could be any one of forms: carbon, waste, water, ecosystems. Meaningful, measurable climate solutions by 2030 is the first criteria. I'm looking at the third row. So is this a company that we'd invest in? Is it going to have a climate impact by 2030? That's number one. The next two, tied to our region, pretty easy. Is this a market that wouldn't, or a company that would not typically get funding from classic capital? And that's most of the companies we ever see in Thailand or Malaysia or Singapore. Climate equity, does it apply to underserved markets and community? And does it help reduce our Scope 3 emissions? Like I said, 50% or more of our Scope 3 comes from Asia. Why is that? Are you guessing what countries it's probably mostly coming from? Taiwan, Korea, Japan. the chips and the materials that go into the things that we build, that we use, the data centers we use to serve those services to you, come from places with very low renewable energy as its provenance. We got to fix that. And the only way we're going to fix that is by actually making a commitment to renewable energy innovation that's going to affect Asia, all up, but specifically those three countries and perhaps Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore as well. But if we don't fix it, then our 2030 scope 3 will continue to be affected by those, that provenance, and that's not about to change very quickly. Therefore, if you really ask me, what's the #1 area, there's a lot of things that we look at that we would invest in directly in Asia, it'd be renewable energy. So a project in solar in Indonesia, something that we invested in. Less so on mobility, perhaps a little bit more on materials. We're interested in carbon capture. We're very interested in things that could help us with time shifting and place shifting renewable energy. What's time shifting? That's basically saying I can generate something, wait, and then allow it to be used later. And you think about all the other things that we have. We know how to time shift everything. The electrons and the data, that's called data storage. Physical goods, we just put them in a locker. But when it comes to electricity, we all know there's transmission loss, but more importantly, there's just loss. And batteries just are very, very imperfect. Let's fix that. When it comes to place shifting, there's so much more that we could do around transmitting energy at the time, basically matching demand and supply. And here's the target technologies and solutions. So here's where I'm going to go on a little bit of that digression to the EMA. So the story about the Energy Market Authority is I was a board member for 6 years. First year or two, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just listening and slapping the wrist of energy companies like my friends in the back at Shell who were doing things that we weren't really agreeing with. But finally we decided we needed to make a policy that worked. And the way we might think about it is say, all right, they're going to work on trying to reduce the amount of demand response, right? To reduce the amount of carbon that you need in the everyday industries that you have. You can work on the existing technologies, right? Like solar and wind. You can think about the new technologies. You guys are going to be the nuclear table here. So you can look at those. But the most important was probably regional grids and imports. I could almost not believe that the number of electrons that we imported from other countries in Singapore was 0 when I started. And it was only 0 until 2 years ago. Now Malaysia, Laos, Thailand, and Singapore are building a network to deliver green electrons from hydroelectric power in Laos and eventually Yunnan to Singapore. There are projects in Indonesia that are going to bring this across. The answer wasn't one of these 4. It was all of these 4 in a multi-path solution to get to our 2050 commitment. And while we were pretty sure we were going to go do this, and we were pretty sure, although there was some snickering about whether or not we should actually trust our neighbors, we had no choice. We had to build regional energy. We knew about solar, but there were a lot of people who said, oh, it's not sunny enough in Singapore. I really didn't believe them. It's 8% solar, but that could go way up if we did the smart things. But this is the table that we almost let drop. And I made a comment at the last committee meeting in a room about this size. I said, we must look at small modular reactors and think deeply about ways in which that could solve our problem. It's more important than hydrogen. There was again snickering in the room. We're a small nation. We can't have a Fukuoka accident. The amount of effort and energy that people think about the Chernobyl and Fukuoka issues far exceeds the potential, or far exceeds the potential downside of not doing it. And I looked at the chairman and I said, you've got to slam the table. He did, and now nuclear is going to be a big part, hopefully a part of our energy mix going forward in Singapore. There's a lesson in that. The lesson is new technology can lead the way. Have anyone heard of OpenAI and its CEO called Sam Altman? Obviously we all have, he's now new royalty. Sam famously said recently that AI, and specifically AGI, will solve nuclear fusion. And I started to think about that, and my first reaction was like, really? Maybe we'll do fission a lot better? Then I realized, of course it will. Exponentially, the things that we are able to do, the way in which we will figure out how to rotate, to balance for the rotation of the Earth, will make the plasma sit still for long enough for us to get fusion to work, because AI will figure it out, because we are limited as humans to figure out things like that. And it will figure it out super fast. So I'm not saying be complacent and do nothing and wait for Sam's technology to figure out how to do nuclear fusion, but you have to have a vision. Because if you're not in it, you can't win it. You have to start thinking about ways in which we're going to do all four to get to our targets. That's really all I had to say today. We're super interested, this is just a carbon call, you can look into it. We're super interested in working with customers, of course, around ways in which we could use our data platforms in our cloud to make you more successful. But I'm here just to plead with you. Microsoft is a large company, is doing its best. We really believe it internally. There's a lot more that we could do. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We'd love to make investments in Southeast Asia and Asia all up that are going to make a difference. And we know that technology matters from our Singapore examples. With that, I just want to say thank you. And thank you for being great citizens of the world.
Thank you, Mr. Zaman. We are truly grateful for your valuable contributions to today's session on corporate sustainability. Your extensive experience in the industry combined with your expertise in corporate business development and your commitment to fostering diversity and inclusion has enriched our understanding of the subject. Now I request Dr. Nisha Kohli to present the token of appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally reached the conclusion of our engaging and insightful session 5. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for your active participation and valuable contributions. Your enthusiasm and dedication have truly made a difference in making this event a resounding success. We invite you to join us later for an evening of celebration and recognition as we honor the remarkable achievements of individuals and organizations who have made outstanding contributions to the sustainable landscape. See you again at the dinner and awards program later today. Thank you.
I know we have had a very, very long day, but it was, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your engagement and participation. Truly, truly appreciated the way you're sitting till now on your seats since morning. Thank you for that. We have an interesting and energetic program coming up in the evening, which is 7 to 10. There, I'll talk about that. So we had GRIT Awards. GRIT Awards stands for Sustainable Growth with Resilience, with Intention and Innovation leading to Transformation. So in this, every year companies all over the world, they apply for this and they get evaluated by 8 global jury members. Each jury evaluates, each company gets evaluated by two jurors. Sorry, I'm tired. So, yeah, and there are 3 categories. One is the main award category, which is Trailblazers, Rising Star, and Changemakers. Then we have SDG Awards, and then we have Special Awards. And good news is there are 2 special awards this year, which are secret. So you don't know who will be the winner. So please be available. Maybe you'll miss out on your award. And that award is Men in Sustainability and Women in Sustainability. So these 2 awards are special and kept secret so far. These awards could go to any of the companies that applied, could also go to any of the speakers who participated. Given your presentations, given your content that you shared, we had all that from the last 10 days, we got evaluated, and those awards will be announced at the night program. So looking forward to it. Please relax for 1 hour. We'll be back. Thank you so much. Thank you.